Hello everyone, welcome to TechstrongTV. Today is Monday, July 18th. I'm Natan Solomon, and I'll be your host today while Alan and the Techstrong team take on JFrog's Yalla DevOps in Israel. Today we have a full slate of great interviews and conversations with some awesome people. I'll start by diving into the tech headlines and touching up on some of the biggest things happening around the world in tech. Then, we have an interview with Alan and Borja Shaknovich, who is the CEO and co-founder of AirSlate, a workflow automation software company. They'll discuss AirSlate's recently released data showing how digital transformation efforts are continuing onward from the perspective of consumers. Next, we'll turn back to RSA Conference from last month, where Alan interviewed Michael Mumshaglu, who is the CEO and co-founder of CardinalOps, a security vendor that provides a SaaS platform. Its platform delivers AI-powered detection content and metrics, and it protects against meter attack techniques. They also discuss CardinalOps' recent research report that measured effective implementation of tools by reading the data collected from production systems. We then have an interview from KubeCon Cloud NativeCon in Valencia, Spain. Alan is joined by Satya Sankaran, who is the Chief Operations Officer for Catalogic. In the interview, Alan and Satya talk about establishing cyber-resilient Kubernetes backups, which has become an increasingly hot topic recently. Afterwards, we have an episode of TechstrongTV Today with Alan, Mitch, and Mike Rothman. We recently welcomed Mike Rothman to the company as Chief Strategy Officer and GM of Techstrong Research, which is super exciting for everyone here at Techstrong. In this episode, the trio discussed some macro-level technology issues, as well as the impact of the economic slowdown and potential recession on VC funding. We'll also be airing part 1 of an episode of The Haunted Hacker with Mike Jones. In this part, he'll be discussing the angel investor, entrepreneur, and brilliant mind known as NATO. They'll be going through NATO's story and background, so you definitely don't want to miss it. Then, we have back-to-back interviews with Charlene at RSA Conference. First, she talks to Lou Crocker, Director of Customer Engineering at Digital AI, about how they are consolidating 5 companies with the intent of bringing value stream management to the market. Next, she welcomes Nikhil Gupta, CEO and co-founder of ArmorCode. They chat about ArmorCode's AppSecOps platform, which provides a complete solution for application security posture management, universal vulnerability management, and DevSecOps automation. Finally, we have View with Vizard. Mike has a fascinating discussion with Norris Ismail, Managing Director for Breakwater Solutions. They dive into what organizations should expect once the American Data Protection Act becomes the law of the land in the US. That's what we have coming up for you here on Techstrong TV. Let's get the show started. Enjoy.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
Hi everyone, today is July 18th, and here are the headlines. First, China suffered a massive cybersecurity breach affecting over 1 billion people. Cybercriminals found a way into a Shanghai National Police database that was left unsecured in what is the largest cybersecurity breach in the country's history. A cybercriminal going by the name China Dan was offered a massive amount of Chinese citizens' information on a web forum for $200,000 or 10 Bitcoin. On the forum, the hacker wrote that the hacked database contains many terabytes of data and information on billions of Chinese citizens, including names, addresses, birthplaces, national ID numbers, and mobile numbers. According to cybersecurity experts, the data located on the server was securely stored until hackers arranged a gateway, allowing for the server's firewall to be breached. It remains to be seen which individual or group is responsible for the attack, but it's clear that there is an extensive amount of citizens' information for sale on the internet. Next, The U.S. Federal Communications Commission is creating an incentive program to close the digital divide on tribal lands. The agency will make it easier for tribal communities to get access to wireless spectrum to provide broadband and mobile service in areas where traditional providers don't. The FCC voted unanimously to establish the Enhanced Competition Incentive Program, which will motivate large carriers like AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile to make their unused wireless spectrum available to small carriers and tribal groups. The digital divide is a problem lawmakers have been trying to solve for decades. Although billions of dollars are spent every year in an attempt to connect more Americans, there are still millions without reliable, affordable, high-speed access. With a low population density and diverse terrain, building networks in rural America has been a major challenge. By rewarding carriers to use their licensing, the FCC hopes to solve this problem and connect Americans everywhere. In other news, Ethereum, the second biggest blockchain in the world, is transitioning to proof of stake, making it nearly carbon neutral. Many crypto critics have ridiculed the excessive use of electricity and its large carbon emissions. In an attempt to combat this, Ethereum will adopt a new system known as proof of stake, which has been planned since before its inception in 2014. When proof of stake comes into effect, miners will no longer have to solve cryptographic puzzles to verify new blocks, severely changing the environmental impact of the crypto. This could have a variety of impacts on the price of Ethereum, which is already down nearly 70% since the beginning of the year. Many hope that the change to proof of stake could vitalize the crypto, but only time will tell. Next, a new iron catalyst could make hydrogen fuel cells affordable. In a study published in Nature Energy, scientists describe how iron can be combined with nitrogen and carbon to produce a catalyst that is efficient, durable, and inexpensive, checking each of the boxes set out by the U.S. Department of Energy for fuel cell research. For decades, scientists have been searching for a catalyst that reduces the cost of creating hydrogen fuel cells. Such a catalyst could be revolutionary, allowing the world as we know it to run on a fuel whose only byproduct is water. In the past, scientists have turned to iron-based catalysts, and although iron is abundant and inexpensive, it still doesn't perform as well as platinum. In this study, scientists bonded 4 nitrogen atoms to the iron, creating the most efficient iron-based catalyst to date. The durability rate of this improved iron-based catalyst even came close to the platinum group catalyst, marking a massive breakthrough and leading us one step closer to affordable hydrogen fuel cells. In other news, Amazon announced it would create more than 4,000 permanent jobs in the UK in 2022, defying job cuts that have made their way around the entire tech industry. The jobs will fill needs for software development, product management, engineering, as well as operational duties in fulfillment centers, sort centers, and delivery stations. Additional staff will be added in regions across the UK, including Wakefield and Knowsley in northern England. The hirings will bring Amazon's permanent workforce in the UK to 75,000, the company said. With rising inflation and higher interest rates, many are surprised at the move by Amazon. Major companies like Microsoft, Netflix, and Robinhood have went through hiring slashes and taken other cost-cutting measures, but Amazon appears to be weathering the storm in a different way. On Security Boulevard, we have an article talking about researchers from Google's Project Zero, which examines and analyzes zero-day vulnerabilities. The team, which examined 18 zero-day vulnerabilities exploited by hackers this year before a patch was available, found that half those vulnerabilities were caused by poor software fixes. The article argues that those vulnerabilities could have been avoided if software vendors had been more diligent in developing and testing patches. Finally, on Digital CXO, we have an article that poses the question, will the metaverse be the future for hybrid work? With companies around the world shifting to remote and hybrid work, it seems it may be here to stay with newfound satisfaction and productivity. However, the metaverse provides a unique opportunity that can make hybrid work feel realer than ever before. The use of avatars in the metaverse would enhance employees' experiences with a new sense of realism. However, there are still productivity concerns surrounding the shift to a metaverse hybrid workplace, just as there were during the initial shift to remote and hybrid work. And that's today's headlines. Thanks for watching.
This is TechstrongTV.
Hey everyone, welcome back here to TechstrongTV. I've got a new company, a founder CEO to introduce you to here. Well, it's not a new company per se, it's new to our audience. His name is Borya, which is kind of a Russian shortening of Boris. Borya Shakanovich, and I hopefully didn't mangle it too bad, but Bora, you say it better than I.
Boris Shakhnovich, yes. Very nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank
it's
you.
a pleasure to make your acquaintance.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. So, Bora, you know, we should start off with a little bit about you and then a little bit about your company.
Sure. So I am an accidental entrepreneur. I was educated as a scientist. I did my PhD in Boston University in bioinformatics, and then I became a professor there, and then moved over to Harvard and started my first company, which was called I Am Scientist, which was a professional network for researchers. In 2008, after I left academia, that didn't work. Great, idea to change the world, but a really bad business. And then in 2011, I joined the founder of at that time called PDF Filler. That was a product. And that was a company that was doing a sort of cloud-based PDF editing solutions. And when I joined, it was just one person, and we bootstrapped it over the next 4 years from 2012 to 2016 to about $16 million in revenue and 130 people. And that's when we had our first round of financing, Series A, from General Catalyst. And that was the beginning of the sort of the future growth of the company and the transformation of the company from a single product company to a multi-product portfolio company aimed at process automation, middle office automation, business automation in general. And that's when we bought a company called SignNow, which was an e-signature solution. Over the next couple of years, we also built our flagship product called AirSlate, which is really a no-code RPA solution for automating business processes and integrating them into cloud systems of record. And ever since then, we've been growing. And so now we are 1,000 people serving over 1 million customers, everybody from mom and pop shops to Fortune 500 companies, many Fortune 500 companies that use our products. And we continue to grow and innovate and, add to the portfolio of products. We also added recently U.S. legal forms, which is the largest library of legal forms and documents, and other products as well, with the aim of building an end-to-end solution that allows non-technical users to be able to essentially create IT-light solutions that is the lifeblood of the business, which is business processes, user interface design, customer relationships, and back office integrations.
What a great story, man! Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
That's excellent. I just want to make sure people out here don't get confused because you mentioned a few different products. The official name of the company now, though, is AirSlate, or it's PDF Filler?
No, it's the official name of the company is AirSlate, and it has 5 products: PDF Filler, SignNow, AirSlate, U.S. Legal, and then a couple of other ones. But yeah, these are the 4 major products. So.
I could relate. I started this thing as a blog for DevOps.com, and then started Security Boulevard, which was always my passion and background anyway in cyber. Then Container Journal for Cloud Native and Digital CXO. And so we have all of these brands, and we were known as Media Ops. Then I started this TV show here called video show. It's not really TV. TechstrongTV. And went through the whole thing, and you might have had a similar thing. We hired the fancy Silicon Valley agency to try to get your branding right because you have all these different products. And they were supposed to, we paid them, to come up with a new name for the corp. And they said, you already have a great name, TechStrong. Use that for the whole thing. So we wound up as TechStrong. But it's funny, when you grow organically a bit like that, these things happen and you have acquisitions on top. It's a great story, though. The other thing, though, in listening to it, Boria, is, right, you happened, it sounds like you guys were in the right place at the right time for a couple of different sort of macro trends, which you helped enable and in turn probably put wind in your sails, right? One was this whole no-code, low-code thing. Right, people wanting to get tasks done that I didn't have to go hire a software development team and, take a year or 9 months to build an application that I'm going to update and upgrade it. I want to make it happen now. I want to, so no code, low code is certainly a huge kind of wave that you guys are riding. The other thing is just the whole transference of paper to digital. You want to call that digital transformation, right? It's funny, I forgot if I was on LinkedIn yesterday, someone put up a meme. It was that old manila envelope. Remember the old manila envelopes with the ties? And there was like lines, and you would say, okay, it went from Boyer to Allen, and then I would cross out Boyer's name, and I would write the next person I'm sending it to, right? And that was inter-office communications, circa 1986, right? And think about where we are now. I mean, you empower that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I think that a lot of the great IT companies that have been built over the last 40 years have been built on business process automation. ERP companies, Microsoft built their business on top of that in a very large respect. SAP, Oracle, a lot of those companies have built huge conglomerates on top of the notion that the data that flows inside of the company is the lifeblood of the company and needs to be not only stored and retrieved, but also computed, also analyzed, also made useful, and a bunch of other things like that. And that, I think, is the primary value proposition for a lot of the things that drive those digital transformations. And then the other part, like you said, I think that automation is a large part of what's driving digital transformation as well, right? I mean, I think that we as a macro economy always strive to be more efficient, and automation is the basis for that efficiency, right? I mean, efficiency comes from automation. And so I think that a lot of the things that people used to do very manually, to your point, like readdressing manila envelopes and other things like that, are woefully inefficient, not only because they're slow, but because there's a lot of opportunities for mistakes. And I think that digitization of those processes both decrease the number of mistakes and increase the speed of the actual data transfer. And then finally, I think if you look at the arc of technology overall, I think that things have been going in the same direction in that using the technology becomes easier and easier, right? So like before, there used to be the punch cards. Afterwards, there's these very complicated languages like assembly. Then there are easier languages, but still were very complicated like C. And then people went into other kind of scripting languages like PHP and other things like that. And what that does is it increases the number of people that have access to technology and that can do that technology. And I think the no-code movement is a lot about that. It's the democratization of technology in the same way that's been happening over the last 50 years that allows many more people to participate in the technology revolution, and not only participate, but also benefit from it in that they themselves become much more valuable as parts of that economy, and valuable not only to themselves, but also to their employers. And so I think a lot of the mission of the company is about that democratization of technology, especially in the middle office and for white collar workers, that allows them to create much more value per unit time than they otherwise wouldn't be able to do without the tools and platforms that we provide.
Agreed. We hear the term citizen developer, right, applied a lot to this low-code, no-code space, where, look, people want to get something done. Tools like yours allow them to quickly create something that gets it done. Boris, I've started 5, 6 companies in my time as well. Also, some did well, some didn't do so well. One of the things I've been involved in the VC world and helped VCs, with their portfolios. And one of the things I always hear from entrepreneurs is, our biggest competitor is a spreadsheet, right? You've probably heard that from people too, right? Right? There's no other thing that does exactly what we do. People are using spreadsheets, it doesn't work. In your case, though, that's really the facts, isn't it? I mean, probably your biggest competitor, especially in the mid-small business line, is spreadsheets.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's paper, it's spreadsheets. Frankly, I think that's a little bit. I'm not sure whether I agree with all of that. I think my biggest competitor is laziness. Frankly,
Yeah.
I think it's the inertia of not wanting to do anything, and I think that a lot of the reason for why change happens slower than we expect is because people are resistant to change, right? I mean, they don't want to do things that are different, and so you have to wait until a new generation is born before, and that actually figure out how to do things the right way from the beginning, and then it becomes the wrong way to do for the next generation, and so on it goes, right? And I think that in a lot of ways is our competition, and also, I think our competition is a lot of the sort of top-down solutions that is, I think, outdated in a lot of ways, in the way that people introduce technology. And I think this product-led growth idea that people have been very successful at over the last 5 to 10 years, which has been enabled by a lot of the internet and direct-to-consumer kind of distribution models, has really changed the game, in that a lot of the products now have to stand on their own, not on the shoulders of salespeople and sales machines, but really on the value that the products that provide themselves and the quality of the products themselves. And I think that that's going to do wonders for the IT community and technology in general over the next decade, where I think that the moat is going to be the community of people that know your products, that know how to use them, and that know how to gain benefit from it, rather than a go-to-market which is very dependent on these, sort of corporate sales processes, where the whole corporation has to implement a certain product, rather than the user of the product decides whether that product is good for them or not.
100%. You know what, Boris? We're going to go so over here. We had a great conversation, but I need to talk about your company a little bit. You guys recently announced some funding. Share with us.
Yeah, so we raised $51.5 million recently from G Squared and from UiPath. And the UiPath partnership is an interesting partnership because UiPath actually created a VC arm, specifically in order to make this investment. And one of the reasons for why that is because the missions of the two companies is so similar, in that what they want to do is, sort of empowerment of the middle office through automation. And that is exactly our mission as well. And I think that we very much complement each other from a product and from the perspective of products, in that the solutions that they provide and the solutions that we provide oftentimes combine to create outstanding automation solutions in business. And so we're really excited about that partnership in general.
Excellent. And this 51 million raise, this most recent raise, was done at a unicorn valuation for the company, yeah?
Post-billion-dollar valuation, sure.
Excellent. Congratulations again on that. Look, we could do the usual questions about what you're going to use the money for, but I think we know the answers, right? You're going to do more products, expand sales and marketing, and help grow this business. I'm wondering, though, Boris,
there's this Ferrari that I really wanted to buy.
Well, there is that new Ferrari. I think the UI people may have a problem with that, but it's okay. Hey, it's your life.
We're all friends.
Yeah. I read there was an article in the Times yesterday. Funding over this past quarter for tech startups was down, I think, 23%, which is a sizable number, right? Probably the biggest drop since they said 2019. And part of it is, look, with COVID, there was just so much money being thrown at things a little bit. I think we'll all agree. some valuations were probably a little out of line. And so we're seeing this sort of correction, if you will. But, $50 million is a healthy raise, and then a post-billion-dollar valuation as well. People don't write checks for nothing. I don't care what time it is in the economy. So congratulations. I'd love to have you come back on, talk more maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Come invite me. I had a blast.
We'd love to have you. Love to have you on. Hey, man, congratulations. You know what? There's a lot of people out there watching this saying, that's what I want to be, or that's what I want to do. So good for you, man.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. We're going to take a break here on TechStrong TV. We'll be right back.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Strong TV.
Hey everyone, back here live at RSA Streaming. We're in Moscone West. It's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so getting a little later on the East Coast. And it's probably good in evening in Europe and Asia. But wherever you're watching this from, thanks for joining us. Our next guest is Michael Munchkalu.
Right.
Close.
Yeah, close enough. Close enough,
A Turkish name, but we'll call him Michael.
Yep.
Michael is the co-founder of Cardinal Ops, right? And this is a company we haven't featured before. One of the great things about being here at RSA is we get to meet, for us, new companies and new people. Michael, welcome. Give us a little background on Cardinal Ops, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. Actually, Cardinal Ops was founded in RSA of 2020.
Really?
Yeah.
The last RSA?
Right, the last RSA in
here.
person. So it's great to be back and meet everyone in person.
Absolutely.
And we are, so Cardinal Ops kind of in a sentence is looking to help organizations operationalize the security tools they have, their security analytics platforms, their SIMs, their EDR and XDR
And
platforms.
there's been millions and billions of dollars spent on them and not being used.
Exactly, and they're not seeing that return. They're frustrated for how much care and feeding is required to make those platforms
Sure.
effective. So we help them identify the gaps and remediate them so that they're prepared for the next attack by making their tools more effective.
So is this done via some sort of SaaS app? Is it a personal, like professional services? How does it work?
Right. Yeah, great question. So we basically build a SaaS platform. It's a product that is that platform connects through APIs to your existing tools, and then starts to query them, understand how are they configured, how are they deployed, how are they operating, how are they integrated into one another, and then is able to detect the misconfigurations and gaps that would lead to kind of to a next attack not being detected due to that poor implementation. That the platform can then use the same API to push the remediations to fix those tools to make them have the right rule set in place, be properly configured in terms of having the right data, parsing that data correctly, and having everything required to really leverage the full potential of those tools.
Great, love it. So Michael, so you're co-founder,
Yeah, indeed.
CEO,
Yes.
but this isn't your first company.
Right.
You say it was founded, launched RSA 2020, so about 2 years ago. Give us kind of the story. What's the backstory here? What came about for Cardinal Ops here?
Yeah, of course. So kind of started my career back in the Israeli intelligence, where I also met my co-founder and CTO, Yair Manor. After that, in 2011, I founded my first cyber startup called Light Cyber.
Sure.
Light Cyber was one of the first behavioral analytics companies detecting attackers and enterprise networks. It was actually also an Innovation Sandbox finalist in 2014.
Wow.
And
That was early for the sandbox.
yeah. And
Right.
in 2017, we were acquired by Palo Alto Networks. That technology eventually became what's known today as Cortex XDR. So in the process, we launched a new product line and also defined the XDR category in the market. So it was amazing 3 years there. Learned a lot and was a great experience. But then, I realized I wanted to start over again.
Do more.
Right? Do more and solve more problems. And I think a theme that really recurred throughout all those years in the industry was what we really see how customers are struggling to implement the security tools they're buying. So they're, a medium enterprise can have 30 or 40 or 50 different tools.
Shelfware.
Right. And operationalize so much technology is a huge challenge. And what we've seen also is that work today is done exclusively manually. There's basically the complexity is rising, and the number of the infrastructure you're trying to protect is extremely dynamic. The threat landscape is constantly evolving. The number of tools is growing. The complexity of those tools, etc. So just trying to solve that in manual ways is just cannot keep up with the rate of change.
But you know what? To be fair, this is not a new problem, right?
That is true.
I've been in security 25 plus years. I remember when SIM first became like a thing. And this is ArcSight, pre-HP even, right? Before ArcSight got bought by HP. The amount of money people were putting, and I'm not blaming ArcSight or even SIMs. I saw it with firewalls. I saw it with UTM. I saw it with IDS, IPS. I saw it with vulnerability management. I saw it with DLP and just about every security technology. They sound great. It's a shiny new silver bullet that people advertise as solving the security problem. People plop down, they get budget, they buy these products, and then either they didn't budget what it costs to truly implement. The implementation is so difficult, that, look, maybe 1% of the companies have that kind of expertise to really implement these things. Or quite frankly, the product didn't work as advertised, right? And so much security, software and solutions became, I once went into a place and they had made flower pots out of it was a UTM box, right? It became a flower pot because they just didn't bother. So the amount of waste, the amount of money spent on security and then not utilized or operationalized, as you say. I mean, it had a measure in the billions, if not tens of billions of dollars.
And that's really what's driving us is the opportunity here to make a big impact. We're seeing the starting point is that roughly what we're hearing from CISOs is that they're leveraging about 20% of the capabilities of their tools. I think
that's about right.
So kind of our potential or our promise and our mission is to kind of 5x that to bring them to real.
Look, but here's the thing: your potential is 5x. If you 3x'd it, you succeeded wildly beyond anything that we've had today. So that would be a good thing, right?
Yes, we're working on it.
Absolutely. Now, I understand you guys recently did a research report.
Right.
Talk to us about that.
Sure. That it's actually the second year that we publish this annual research report talking about the effective implementation of tools focused on the world of SIM. And something important for me to stress out is that it's not a survey asking people their opinions. It's rather data collected from actual production systems to measure their effectiveness in actual production deployments of customers. And what we've found is that these gaps that we talk about theoretically are very, very concrete and measurable. We find that an average SIM would only be able to detect 5 out of the top 14 MITRE attack techniques, right? The most widely used kind of in the wild, most common techniques used. We find that even when they do implement and work hard to create rules, we find that 15% of the rules they have in place are actually broken and non-functional because everything constantly is in flux, is changing, and so even the limited rules that they have in place is not fully operationalized, and it's kind of a blind spot. They are hoping to be protected there, but they're not. Maybe a last interesting statistic to share is that only 25% of organizations collecting identity data into their SIM, which sounds like a very kind of common best practice, don't actually create the rule set to trigger real-time alerts based on that data. And we know how important that type of data is to prevent breaches.
So can you think of a more inefficient industry than security?
I really don't blame us as the practitioners. The complexity of the cyber program is such that it's not a problem solvable by a single tool. So now we are tasking each and every enterprise today to solve as what I call a nation state grade problem. They need to defend against everything bad out there with a state-of-the-art technology and doing that again for just their organization. And they need to, every organization out there is faced with that challenge. So it's not, by no means, I think it's an easy challenge. No. And I think we've brought automation to different areas of security. So we've brought it to, of course, detection. We brought it to incident response with SOAR tools, automating those investigation processes.
We see it in DevSecOps, right? We're seeing security testing being automated into the pre-release, cycle, the CI/CD, life cycle. But that being said, and again, this is my opinion, right? At the same time, we've made some progress with that. The problem also is that our security problems have become more complex.
Sure.
And so, there's this old saying, one of the problems I think in the world today is we look for simple solutions to complex problems. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there aren't simple solutions to complex problems. Complex problems have complex solutions. Right. And so that's another straw on the camel's back.
It's true. I actually was in a panel today and we just talked about that. I shared my opinion that the problem is constantly getting harder and we're getting better, but it's more or less in equilibrium.
Right. That's what it is. It's that mutually assured destruction kind of thing. Anyway, hey, we didn't mention where people can get more information about Cardinal Ops. Where do they go?
Yeah, sure. You're, of course, welcome to visit our website at cardinalops.com. You can download the research report. It's, of course, freely available. We're happy to share our insights with the industry to help it make it better. Of course, feel free to reach out if there's anything we can be helpful with.
All right. Hey, Michael, thanks for being on.
It was a real pleasure talking to you.
It's a pleasure having you here. It's a great concept. I'm interested to see what people are saying because this is... any efficiency we could build in here would be great. So
awesome. Really appreciate it.
Cool stuff. All right. We're going to take a break. We're live at Moscone Center. We're going to be back in a moment. We'll be streaming some more. Until then, stand by.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, we're back here live at KubeCon, Cloud Native Con, Valencia. We are in Hall 1. Traffic is picking up again. I guess sessions might have just ended. It is a lot of buzz, a lot of people out here. We're happy to be here. My guest for this session is Satya Sankaran. And welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Satya is with Cloud Casa by Catalogic?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. Satya, if you don't mind, look and tell our audience, tell us about the company, maybe a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Satya. I'm the founder and GM of Cloud Casa. Cloud Casa is a backup as a service player in the Kubernetes ecosystem. We're a cloud native backup service that essentially eliminates the need for a separate backup infrastructure in Kubernetes for Kubernetes users, right? So you simply log into a portal, you can scan your clusters, and we can actually back up your data sets either on-prem or to the cloud. We're also the only cloud-aware backup service. So we're not we don't just understand Kubernetes, we're also the players that can understand your EKS service and the AKS service and leverage that for delivering centralized management, compliance, which is a big part of what you do in data protection, and also deliver cyber resilience to make sure that you are protecting your critical data assets, but also configured it correctly, because it's so easy to misconfigure something in the world of Kubernetes, so many moving parts. So we deliver all of that as a service so that without having to maintain a separate backup infrastructure.
Got it, love it. Now, so you're the founder of Cloud and general manager of Cloud Casa. That was acquired by Catalogic? Is that the situation?
Yeah, it's a case of a startup within a startup.
Right? Okay, I love those.
I was the chief operating officer of Catalogic, and we were building copy data management products. That was very storage aligned. In fact, our DNA is really building products to partner with large marketplace.
Got it.
So we had an in-place copy data management product that was acquired by IBM in May 2021. That acquisition was foreseen by a lot of us. And that was also around the time we were investing heavily internally on making our backup applications run as microservices, containers, and so on. So we were adopting Kubernetes. When we were adopting Kubernetes, we realized that getting started with Kubernetes is a lot easier than managing Kubernetes down the road.
No doubt.
So there are a lot of data challenges out there. We do backup and restores well. We've done backups and restores for all the way from mainframe to storage integrated NoSQL databases. So we kind of follow wherever the data is, and we see data kind of flowing into the world of Kubernetes. So we built this Cloud Casa product line, should really be called a service line, right? So we built this Cloud Casa as a separate business line because the audience that we sell to is very different.
Yeah.
It is a developer-focused ecosystem community. We were selling to mostly IT folks and storage folks in the other product lines. So to us, it just made sense that one, we were adopting a different service model for delivering our
to a different audience.
Yeah, and to a different audience. So it made sense for us to kind of align our branding with the target we were reaching out to. So that's why it's a separate business line within Catalogic, and it's a great case of actually being in a company that has been there for 20 years and actually building a product and service from ground up. And those opportunities don't come very often, so it was exciting.
So what I find interesting though too is, look, there are a lot of people who say, oh, backup service? Yeah, old hat.
Yeah.
We've been doing backups, on tape, on mainframes forever.
Backup is boring.
Backup is boring. But, well, number one, it's necessary. But number two, even in this world, cloud native world, there are new applications for essentially backup that are now aimed at new audiences, as you mentioned, like developers, like Kubernetes operators and so forth. And it takes what we used to call just boring backup, and now we're talking about things like data management, and which is, not even subtly, it's very different than just saying backup.
Yeah.
Right? But it helps with that data management, and it's a vital piece of this whole process of how we deploy and run our software today. So it really is. I mean, it's backup, but it's not.
Yeah.
Right? It's more. It's backup, but it's more.
Yeah.
So you guys have announced some new stuff here at the show. I think you kind of referenced it a little bit, but why don't we nail that down? What have you guys announced here?
Yeah, so two things. First, you called backup boring. We're happy to be the last line of defense for you. I think there is an important need for that, especially in the world of cyber attacks everywhere. In fact, a lot of our recent announcements have been about establishing cyber resilience rather than just backup. We don't want to be just your last line of defense.
Ransomware and everything else.
we are touching everything that is important to you. And so we deliver cyber resilience. We not only back up your data, we also make sure your data is configured correct. We run configuration scan, we run container scan, we run network scan, we check against your CIS benchmarks. In our service, when you protect your critical assets, we also make sure your critical assets are configured correctly and are not prone to vulnerabilities. So we do that, as well as be your last line of defense, which is certainly something we want to do. So part of data management is cyber resilience, and I think that's what we deliver. And announcements for KubeCon, I think there are 3 themes in our announcements for KubeCon. One is just improving our cloud awareness. It is not enough to just know Kubernetes. Most of Kubernetes is now running in the cloud. Kubernetes is being developed as the operating system for cloud. A lot is about taking advantage of the ephemerence and the elasticity that is provided in the cloud, right? So we already support native integration with AWS EKS,
Sure.
which means we can talk to EKS, we can see all your clusters in one place, across all your accounts and all your regions. And we've expanded that capability to AKS as well. So we can now talk to the Azure Kubernetes service. We can see all your Azure clusters across different data centers and regions, across different accounts in one place. What does it deliver? Centralized management, so you can actually see everything in one place. 2, ephemerence we talked about, which means clusters are coming up and down all the time in the world of Kubernetes. And what you see with us is we can actually sync with your environment, right? Because we can talk to the parent service, we can see when a new AKS cluster comes up. We can see when an old AKS cluster gets moved. And these things happen so often that I think being able to be in sync with your cloud accounts is very important.
Absolutely.
3, we know how your cluster is now actually configured, right? Kubernetes itself has an envelope on top, which is what is used by AKS and EKS. So we know how your AKS clusters are configured. We actually back up that metadata as well. We not only back up what is inside Kubernetes, we also back up how a cluster is configured. And that information is also protected. So when we restore, we can spin up a new cluster automatically in the same service that looks just like what it was when we backed it up. Today, all our other products out there require you to have a functional cluster created first. You have to configure the network, you have to install the agent before the first byte moves from the cloud. Who's got time for that, right? So a lot of what we do is to ensure, because we can now talk to the cloud provider, because we know how your cloud cluster is configured, we can leverage that information and simply bring that up quickly on the other side.
Well, you know, look, if these kinds of things at scale, we can't afford the learning curve. We can't afford to say, hey, go here, let me tell you about my infrastructure, let me tell you about my config. We need things that are almost kind of self-aware, if you will, that go out and do their job. They figure that out and just get it done. You know, my friend Brad Feld used to call that auto magic.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Like, I don't know how it works, but it works.
It just works.
It works. I just want it to work.
Yeah.
This is something that I need done. I need it to work.
Yeah.
And that's it. And then if you can make that happen, you've got a beautiful service.
Yeah,
So.
in our ecosystem is all about, Kubernetes is complex. Let's not run away from that, right? So many moving parts.
There's no denying.
Yeah, no denying that. So I think part of what our ecosystem players like us need to do is really make that technology more accessible.
Because that's what's going to make it happen.
Yeah, like you mentioned, I don't know how it works, but it just works. And I think that's the state we want it to go to.
That's what I want.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hey man, I want to thank you for joining us. We didn't mention, where do people get more information?
Yeah, just go to cloudcasa.io.
Cloudcasa.io.
Yeah.
CLOUDCASA.io.
Yeah, it's your smart home and cloud.
I love it, man.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hey, we're going to take a break here in Valencia. We'll be back in a moment with more great interviews and information. It's a great event. We'll see you soon.
is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome to Techstrong TV today. I'm Alan Schimmel, if you don't know, founder and CEO of Techstrong Group in general. But forget all that. I'm really happy that what a team we've got here today for you to talk to. To my far left, you probably already know Mitchell Ashley. Of course, Mitchell and I have worked together a long time, and Mitchell's CTO and the principal analyst at Techstrong Research. Speaking of Techstrong Research, this guy here, really, well, if you've been following Techstrong or Techstrong News, you know we announced it just last week. Mike Rothman, a longtime security insight, Securosis, DisruptOps, security luminary. I think that was the word we used.
It is. It's
I wanted to
embarrassing.
stay away from things.
Honestly, my mom was just like, "Oh my God, he's a luminary! He's a luminary!" She was so excited.
She waited a long time for you to start to glow.
She did. She did.
But he was a late bloomer. Anyway, we're really happy to have Mike Rothman.
You don't know the half of it, man. You know that, right?
We don't want to know if I want to know that half.
That's right.
But Mike Rothman joins us here today. Also, Mike's GM of Techstrong Research, as well as Chief Strategy Officer at Techstrong.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you.
Hey.
Thank you. It's really
Congratulations, Mike.
so
It's a
excited.
pleasure to have you
so
on
excited
here,
to be
man.
here with such good friends.
So-
I mean, this is great.
You know, some of you may ask, what is he doing? What is he doing?
Ask that too.
What he's
Yeah.
doing here is, look, I built a nice business here at Techstrong. Mitchell joined in the last couple of years. We built it more. We built a nice channel. What were we missing? We were really missing, we were missing him. No, we were missing a better element of thought leadership, right? Marrying thought leadership to distribution is a big goal of ours. And I couldn't think of, and it's an overused, cliched bullshit term, but Mike Rothman is a people look to for leadership and thoughts. So hence thought leadership. So Mike, I don't want to embarrass you. Enough said. Welcome aboard.
Thank
We're
you.
happy to have you here.
I'm excited to be here for Techstrong TV. Let's
rock and
Techstrong
roll.
TV today.
Techstrong TV today, for those of you who don't
It's
know.
alliteration
Yes.
week. Yeah.
We're going to spend the next 20 to 30 minutes talking about whatever we want. But we each get to pick one topic and we'll explore the heck out of it. So let's start off with a topic Mitchell picked today, and that is around convergence versus categories. So Mitchell, why don't you lay it out, and then Mike and I will jump in.
So I live on both the side of consumer of analyst services and also contributing as an analyst, working with Mike and Techstrong Research. And I was recently on a webinar, on a panel, and one of the big celebrations was that the analyst shall go nameless is they've added this new thing to this category, and now these products are in this category. Of course, we know in the analyst world, we're constantly creating new categories, subdividing things, creating things. You can argue whether that's how they make money, more revenue by creating more categories for us to subscribe to. But what it made me realize is that we don't live in a black and white world. There isn't a product that just does X unless it's coming from a new company out of a startup. They don't stay in their lanes. They do lots of things. An observability product may do multiple things, right? It may, we have overlap with other monitoring, but also, a PagerDuty kind of application with an analytics package with, you've got to combine those things together. And do we do ourselves a disservice by trying to say, it's that's all it is, and it does that, let's put it in that category, rate it, rank it that way. That's not the world I live anyway.
My 2 cents?
Yeah.
It's because we rush to categorize things, and observability is a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
What the heck is observability?
Let's take a step back. Why is it that we rush to categorize things?
Well, so Mitchell hit on one thing. If you're an analyst, you categorize things, so you create new categories. You kind of invented. I was the guy who invented Zero Trust. Now I work over here and there, right? Not mentioning names. Hi, John.
Kinderrock.
But or quite frankly, going back, Lawrence with NAC, right? We had a really, all of these things.
Yeah,
so,
Charles, yeah.
So analysts definitely have an incentive to invent categories, but also product marketers do.
100%.
Right?
And
because when you're a marketer, you don't want to be the 15th guy. If you're not in the top 3 in your category, get the hell out.
Right.
Well, that's part of the game, is get the analysts to create a category for you.
That's happened once.
Oh,
right,
okay.
you know that the NGFW with Palo is maybe the first time, and most likely the last time, that a vendor-driven category was adopted by the analyst whole cloth and drove to fantastic success. And it was fantastic success. Let's just be clear about that, right? So that's not going to happen. But it really is the product marketers who are sitting there looking at kind of their differentiation, trying to position their company, position their product in an environment where you have 3,000 companies now with hundreds of billions of dollars of investment, if not more, that is in this space. So that's all about differentiation, right? So these guys have to come up with a new category, but the reality is the only folks that can actually create a category are the ones that have raised $250, $300, $400 million, that have the ability to fund a go-to-market force, right? Folks that are in the field that are going to be there beating the drum for a certain topic for a long enough time to get stickiness from that standpoint. It can't be some dude in a garage, right? It can't even be a company that's, remember, we're old enough to remember, right, when raising $10 million in a Series B was like a lot of money.
It was.
Right? So now to us too. Now we have these companies building, or raising for $30 million seed rounds. You're just like, what the, but notwithstanding, to Mitchell's question, right? This is a huge disservice to the rest of the environment because we're trying to draw these shades of gray, some nuance between these products, but the reality is the customers don't think that way, right? Customers think in terms of problems, not your stupid category names. So it's a frustration. I call it the machine, right? The machine is going to do what the machine does.
Let me play old white guy, old white bald guy here. Right? There's nothing new under the sun, or very little.
Very little.
Right?
And so, to me, new category. There are rare exceptions. Maybe the Palo Alto.
Oh yeah.
It's a new firewall. But for the most part, new categories are the result of sharp product marketing folks and analysts who are a little full of themselves, with all due respect to your colleagues.
That's
here.
the job description.
I mean, but that also goes to the point where why do we have all this overlap in functionality? Because is it really a new category? Or I also think for a truly new category to emerge, it has to go through a seasoning process, a maturity process, where we can clearly see the difference between alerting versus observing versus AI ops, what the heck ever that is anyway, right? And in the shiny trinket world that we live in with silver bullets, people rush to categorize. I got something new. I got something fantastic.
That's actually a great segue.
And that's a segue into our next.
Great segue.
Good
I appreciate you debating it.
I'm not as dumb as I look, you boys. So our next category was mine, which is, and this is an age-old category: features versus products. This first bit me in the ass with Chris Hoff. If Hoff's watching this out there, right? He said NAC was a feature back in 2006.
I do remember.
I had a mild car in there.
Farction,
a hard farction, right? Exactly.
Cardio infarction. But I'm an older, wiser shimmy now, and I've come to learn that what is a feature today, or what's a product today, can become a feature down the road again as maturity sets in here. And it's very funny how feature versus product cycles are tied into economic cycles. So given what's going on in the world, and we're going to talk about that in a bit with your thing, I think we are in for a whole bunch of companies that raised a whole bunch, what'd you say, 3,000, there's 3,600 security companies. Don't forget, we're in DevOps now, we're cloud native. I bet you that number is closer to 7,000 or 8,000 companies in the universe that we deal in. And a lot of them raised a lot of money for what is going to wind up being features. It's really hard. You can take a feature company so far until you kind of hit the wall, and either you got to make it a platform, which is the other side of this,
or get acquired.
Or get acquired and get rolled
by another platform.
By another platform, yeah. But I think we're about to see a whole boatload of that.
Yep.
A lot of farctions happening.
Well, no, there will be
only within the VCs that have paid all this money at this, multi-billion-dollar valuations.
Yeah, exactly.
There's going to be a lot of farctions in those boardrooms over the next.
It's going to be. I mean, but again, convergence versus categories. It's like the natural. It's just the way our industry is done.
Right? Yeah.
I think feature versus product is the way of things too. Just because something is a feature in a product today doesn't mean it wasn't a standalone product.
Or a company, right? I mean, I can throw company, you said features product. I mean, a lot of companies are comprised of a product that is really a feature once it goes through that consolidation cycle, right? And back to Mitchell's point about categories and all this kind of stuff, that's constantly shifting because ultimately the aggregators in this business, and we know who they are, right? They're the Palos and the Ciscos and, and the IBMs and a number of these other folks that are
platform companies, the Salesforces of the world.
Microsoft, AWS, right? So those are computing platforms versus security platforms. I mean, and by the way, they're not mutually exclusive on that front, but it does take time usually, and again, that time has been compressing, so that window between when a feature becomes a successful product, becomes a successful company, and then kind of rides the cycle back the other direction, right? That used to be 3, 4, 5 years. Now it's 18 months, 24 years, 24 months, because the reality is a lot of these companies, right, they get to a certain point, maybe $1 million, $2 million in ARR, they get acquired much earlier in the process.
There are
now.
some of them, but this last cycle that we seem to have, let's call it the COVID cycle.
Yeah, crested, yeah.
We saw companies that, look, I was born yesterday, but not last night, right? You knew they were a feature.
Yeah.
But they raised a crap load of money, and they had an awful good ride as a product company, but really as a feature masquerading as a product company. And so it wasn't $1 million or $2 million ARR. Some of these companies have 20, 30, 40 million ARR.
But they raised money at what kind of valuation?
$4 billion, $6 billion.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's going to be the blood on the street here, guys.
Yeah.
Right? When those feature companies, product companies become feature companies, and their valuations then start reflecting that because these big platforms say, son, you're just a feature.
Right.
Well, and on the street.
And I don't know, maybe we'll have something that we don't have like a WeWork analogy, but maybe we'll have a We Security at some point, right? Where a company comes, or Klarna is the latest one, right? Raised money at 45 billion, just did a round at 6, right? That hurts, right? That hurts. That hurts. Right, that one's going to leave. That one's going to leave a mark, right? But we're going to see those things because you have companies, you have companies in the security space that have not just had a unicorn valuation, right? They've raised $1 billion in funding, $1 billion in a security company. Right, there are 5 or 6 maybe that are north of 15 billion in valuation, right? And you've got these companies that have raised $1 billion in capital with the promise that they're going to be able to do that. And I'm sorry, and that's actually a great segue into the next topic, which is we're about to enter into some kind of macro disruption. I don't know, maybe it'll be a short one,
terrible,
right? Maybe it'll be a short one, but there's certainly some kind of macroeconomic disruption that is going to, happen. And a lot of these companies, of course,
underway,
and a lot of these companies are just not going to be able to raise more capital, which is why you're starting to hear about all the layoffs. You're starting to hear about, kind of folks starting to tighten their belts because ultimately they've got to make whatever capital it is that they have last. And then again, you think it seems unkind, right? You have a company that has raised.
Might be unkind,
but they've raised like
nature.
300 million, right? They still have 270 on the balance sheet, and they're cutting people because they were spending 15.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not too good at math, but
we
you
don't
know.
have cuddly little dinosaurs to play
It's
with.
true. It's
But
true.
we don't.
It's true.
We
But
birds.
but in the real world, we have to factor in those kind of things.
Absolutely. You know what? I'm going to tell you something. So, again, not that we're in a new paradigm, but this latest cycle was extreme, right? Because we never saw, like you said, we used to think $10 million seed round. Well, what a great job this guy did raising money. We saw a company raise $1 billion friggin' round. You know how many times I got pitched? Biggest round ever in DevOps. Biggest round ever in cyber.
Yeah. That became the thing.
$1 billion rounds.
It's not I sold a customer something that actually helped them do their job. It was I'm prodigious at raising money.
But and we have friends like that. But speaking of friends, I had a conversation with TJ Jermalack, right? I don't know if you know TJ.
Yeah. From Beyond Identity.
Beyond Identity, and of course, but he was Jim Clark's partner in Netscape and At Home Excite and 18 other friggin' companies. Good work for TJ. He brought up something really interesting to me that was, again, very different about this cycle. It used to be when companies raised money, they put that money in the bank to pay for R&D, marketing, sales, expansion. What's been going on here the last 2 years was a little bit different. And by the way, and if a company raised money to take out an old investor, we call that a mezzanine round.
Or a recap. Yeah.
Right, or a recap or a mezzanine round. Mm-hmm. What happened here is you had companies raising $1 billion. What the frig are they doing with $1 billion? Honestly, what are they going to do with $1 billion? I'll tell you what they're doing. They're taking out their original investors, giving them a decent return, a taste of a nice return, and they're out, lowering their risk, taking some bets off the table. They are giving money, taking out the original co-founders.
Yeah.
Right? Look, I've done venture companies. You've done them. You've done them. When did you ever get to take your money out before the...
I still haven't been able to. What is this? I'm still waiting for my bag of money to show up, right? Where's my bag of money? Right? I don't know.
But these $1 billion rounds were used, the funds were used for different purposes than money's been used before. So it even makes it worse, right? So now these companies who can't raise money for the next 2 years maybe, are sitting here saying, oh my God, I just bought that the old investor out for $200 million. I gave my co-founder, he took out half of his equity. I can't get that money back. Mm-hmm. I'm screwed. So not only am I going from 45 billion to 6 billion, but I ain't got no cash in the bank either.
Right, because I've leveraged it up.
Because I took it, which... Shame on the VCs out there for letting them do that. No,
come on. I mean, these guys,
they have a fiduciary duty.
They wanted a bigger piece of the deal that they thought was going from 45 billion to 90 billion.
Exactly.
And they're as greedy as anybody else. So don't
greedier.
Right.
Greedier.
So don't give me this high and mighty.
No, it's not high and mighty. A prime tenet of VC investing is you never put money in the front door that's going out the back door. They let people take money out the back door.
Because they wanted to win the deal.
Like, I get it. But
and you had other folks. I'm not crying for any of those guys. I'm really crying for these guys as they get on their private plane and fly to the Kentucky Derby. I mean, give me a break, man. I mean, come on. Well, I mean, talk about the smallest violin in the world that I'm playing for a VC.
I saw my mansion in Beverly Hills.
Oh gosh, times are tough, right? My Palm Springs mansion, I have to refinance. Well, I mean, come on, man.
Supply chain issues have delayed the building.
Exactly. It's like oh gosh, I'm not going to be able to buy the NBA team that I was really looking at.
I mean, honesty, yes, you're right. You're right. No one couldn't have been. It's hard to be sympathetic for the 1% of the world.
It is, but you know who it is easy to be sympathetic for is all of those folks that were hired in this growth, kind of fiesta that are now getting, just canned because these folks are going this. I feel terrible for those folks.
Well, you know,
and
I think the positive side of it is we haven't fallen off a cliff. So I think a lot of those people are still getting rehired because of the whole lack of
but not
resources
yet.
we have.
Right?
It hasn't equalized, but it also hasn't.
You bet. And again, which brings back the real topic I wanted to talk about, which is can these beanstalks continue to grow to the sky, right? As we're having this macroeconomic disconnection.
Is that a fallacy, the whole thing about that, you know, Jack and the magic security beanstalks? I don't remember that story as a child.
You have security companies now that are 10 times bigger than the biggest security company ever was.
But is security itself 10 times bigger than it ever was?
The aggregate market, maybe.
Yeah.
But you have these single companies, right? I mean, Palo Alto is on a, almost $8-9 billion, kind of run rate at this point. Microsoft is well past that in terms of just their security business. We haven't seen these numbers before, right? So can they continue to grow at this pace in an economic environment? Because they're certainly valued that way still. So that's going to be interesting to see.
So I'm going to play old bald grumpy guy again. Shit don't change. Shit don't change.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you something. It's the same thing it's ever been. Palo Alto will keep buying innovation and growth.
Exactly.
So will Microsoft, so will Cisco, so will IBM, so will all those guys. And here's another thing I'm seeing. Look, I've been in security 20 years, 20 more. It's always one of the top 3 priorities, but their hands never reach their pockets. But more than ever, so you've lived in the security world exclusively. I've been exposed, to new things. Even in that world, meaning DevOps and cloud natives and everything, the biggest story on the page is security. Whether it's the Open Source Security Foundation and supply chain security and API security and security, right? It's the ransomwares, it's the nation state stuff, it's just good old fashioned financial security around crypto and blockchain. Security is the biggest story in tech today.
Continues to be.
And continues to be, but more than it ever was.
Yeah.
Now,
well, we're going to have to pick this back up.
Well, we're not going to solve this today, right?
Because we solve it on one episode.
No, and again, I mean, I think that we're at a period where we're going to start to see the companies announcing over the next couple of weeks, right? Their Q2 results, and we'll start to see whether we're starting to kind of level off, or whether it's
the results aren't going to be bad. The problem is what are their expectations?
Yeah, what are they saying the expectations?
But let me just say one. I know we got to run, but I got to say one other thing. My experience in these cycles tells me that this is also the time you're going to see some hot new security companies starting up.
Yep.
You will see change. You will see
innovation.
And
that's right.
Can't wait to see what comes out of it. So I'm an optimist at the end of the day.
I think we have to be. To be in this,
that's great.
To be in this crazy business for as long as we have, I think you do have to be an optimist.
You have to be. I think, look, it's going to be okay.
Well, it comes back. We've seen the cycle.
We have.
We've seen what happens.
We have.
It comes through.
We're old enough to remember when seed rounds were like, $600,000.
Yeah.
The kids today are like, oh my God, I can't even buy an Aeron chair for $600,000.
No, but look, but I'll say it again. Letting people take money in the front door, out the back door is a no-no in investing. I would never do it.
Ask the Uber guy or Adam Newman from WeWork or any of these other guys that took a bunch of money out. And I mean, Uber did fine, right? They went public, but WeWork was a total train wreck. I mean, yeah.
Uber wasn't so fine either. There's a series on that too on streaming.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother story. Anyway.
Hey, let's go. Don't we have like some bro culture things that we got to do for that?
Let's not. Please don't. Just came on board. You're going to mess it up.
We haven't done
Hey, before he gets out of control, this is TechstrongTV today. We're out of here. Thanks, Mike. Welcome. Thanks, Mitchell. We'll see you soon. Coming up with next segment for TechstrongTV.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
Welcome to the Haunted Hacker Podcast, episode June, volume 3. Usually I do one a week. This week I've done 3, so we're cruising right along. News for the Haunted Hacker Podcast, business as usual. Things are going great. We have a retired Navy commander coming on in a couple weeks to talk about nation-state security and national security. A lot of things going on as far as Hackers for Vets, the charity, the nonprofit that we started, and the Beard Shave charity that's coming up in November with Matt Lee and the good folks at Richardson at IT Innovation Conference. So in November, this beautiful beard will disappear if we hit $300,000. And that money will go to multiple charities, and one of them being Hackers for Vets, where I started the charity, the nonprofit, to help veterans transition into cybersecurity without having to worry about the monetary issues and navigation. So the money will go to helping them get certifications, laptops, equipment, whatever they need to make a very smooth transition. So without further ado, I'll introduce NATO, and he has a very interesting background, a very entrepreneurial spirit, like myself, and just a fascinating person. I learned about him through other people and started following his content, and I was really impressed. So, NATO, tell us about yourself and tell us how you got into cyber and what you're doing and what your passions are.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. So I come from sort of just like a very kind of DIY background. Like I was one of those people who just like as a kid was messing around with stuff. I learned technology starting really with like the old school Macs, but then I started getting in trouble when I got a Dreamcast, because Dreamcast has a Windows-based operating system on it, and you could plug in a little keyboard and get on a browser. And I wanted to play Phantasy Star Online, and I wanted to play so badly, but it was like it required dial-up, and we didn't have a dial-up connection. So I like as a kid, I like found out that you could get these codes and then use that to get minutes to play this game online. And little did I know at the time, because I was just a kid, I was actually just like taking people's like paid minutes for their dial-up. And then the next thing you know, it's like you get into some trouble doing some things. But eventually I started working to like sell cell phones, like out in the middle of like nowhere. I was like way out in like the mountains, where it's like the closest city was maybe like 4 hours away from me. Nice. And there was like no one who knew anything about technology out there. They're like, hey, you know how to use computers? I was like, yeah, but I don't do computer work. They're like, but you want to do computer? I was like, no. And then like about a few months later, they came back and they're like, well, the cell phone contract is ending, so either we're going to have to fire you, or we do have computer roles available if you want to work with computers, because we think you'd be good at it. I was like, well, I don't want to lose my job. That's actually the only reason I ended up in cybersecurity. And so I started working on it, and they had me like refurbishing computers. I was like setting up like satellite arrays on like ranches and stuff like that. So that I started with like working on like the malware for the ranchers, getting their satellite connections going, and like stuff out in like very strange kind of extreme regions. And then it was also the middle of like the 2008 times when I was really trying to figure stuff out. And so you kind of just take the work you can get. And like other people, I think that there's like this like glamorous idea of like working in a technology job. I was making like minimum wage. I didn't even know that malware analysis was valuable. I was like, oh, this is what minimum wage paid. Like, this is what you do at minimum wage. It's like you do malware analysis. Nice. It was because I didn't even know what it was. I was like, oh, I should find better paying work. So I like went back to the city and I couldn't find better paying work. The stuff that all paid something that was reasonable was the stuff that I was originally getting paid minimum wage for. So then I started working like data centers, and everyone was scared of the data centers. And the only reason I started getting into data center work is because other people are like, oh, that sounds hard. I don't want to do that. They're like, hey, do you want to do it? I was like, I don't know. I've refurbished some computers. That's probably good enough, right? And they're like, yeah, that sounds good. And they just like send me out there.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. So starting out and like as a kid, we definitely have that in common, because one of the first things I did in technology was learn how to build little RF phone taps that go onto landlines, and then they broadcast the conversation via FM signal. So we have sort of the same spirit when it comes to that. So I've looked at some of the stuff that you're doing now, and so one of the things that I really wanted to dive into about your background is Cloud Underground. Tell me about Cloud Underground, the idea behind it, what you're doing with it, just kind of the whole concept of Cloud Underground.
So Cloud Underground is probably, it sounded crazy before we started it, but it worked. So I had originally started a company called Notia Point, which before that was called like Data Design. And I was like, I'm going to go try to work in cybersecurity and like help educate people and all these things. And what I came to find is like, you can tell people the stuff that'll help them get like right into a job, and they won't listen to that. Instead, they'll follow the sexy marketing, right, and then come back and say, well, I can't get a job. I'm like, I have a direct path that'll tell you how to get there. And they're like, well, but I was told I need to go get these certifications. And so I was like, how about I just let that company run with AI? Because I love AI. It's like a hobby of mine, to the point where I like use it forever. If there's some way that I can apply AI, I'm going to do it. So I was like, well, I wonder if I could just like let AI run that company. And so I configured this like AI pipeline using like a number of things. It uses I don't know if anyone knows like how like data arbitrage works, but it's similar to like where's another place where we see arbitrage is like the stock market, like buying and selling trades. Well, you can do similar things with like, let's say that you don't want to host machine learning infrastructure, but you can figure out how to generate like a little bit of cash flow off of something like an application or a product you're flipping or something. You can arbitrage like data sets from like Facebook and from Google and from LinkedIn. And then you can like choose where to like send like what's called like insight tagging over to different things. So I was like, oh, I bet I could just like have AI run the whole company while I go and start a company that solves the other problems that I have with the Notia Point company, which was it was hard to figure out margins because I needed like lower cost infrastructure. Right. And I was like, oh, I know, I'll just talk to some of my top customers and then see if they want to go build some infrastructure. And so that turned into like Randall and like Zach has been on here, who's one too. And they're all like, that sounds like a great idea. Why not? So we were like, we were teaching cybersecurity. So we need a cloud now. So why don't we teach cloud by just building like the infrastructure, and then we can just make it available for the people. And if we make enough money, we can make it free. So we started charging like $150 a month to like sign people up to the dojo. And we're like, come on, we're just going to build a cloud. Let's go. And then we got enough interest, and we got like research partner and stuff like that, and started getting like some deals and some people who wanted to kind of like support our path. And then like Ken was a big part of that. If anyone's heard of like Ken Underhill. And so then we're just like, all right, I guess we're just going to keep going with it. And then after it took about like a little over a year, we actually completed this thing. It's called like a hyper-converged data center. And I was like, all right, well, we taught people how to build cloud by just building one. So why don't we next like just start letting people use it to like, well, now we can teach you how to make a living with the skills, because it's one thing to have skills and it's another thing to know how to make money with your skills. Because my whole thought is like, why don't we get people to stop being broke for no reason when there's like ways to just do stuff? So it's like, well, I'll just give you the cloud, because normally one of the reasons why people have trouble starting companies, and the same challenge at Notia Point, is like infrastructure costs so much, or you need like people to develop these things. I was like, well, I don't want to have to do this over again, ever again. And if I go work somewhere else, I don't want to do it over again, ever again, or like tell someone how to do all those things anymore because I've gotten to the point where I'm sick of teaching it. How do you not teach something you never want to teach or do again? Make it free for everyone. Don't put licenses on it. Don't put stuff on it that says that you terms and take all that away. Take it away and just throw it out there and destroy the market with it because people are going to panic. And then you start getting like the competitors start popping up and they're like, well, you can't do that. I'm like, I can't do what? They're like, you can't just like, there's no such thing as like a copy paste data center. That's a dumb idea. I'm like, well, no one invested in me before I was a threat. So I don't really care about your bottom lines. Right. So this is where we're at. And so now a lot of companies like they depend and rely on like selling things that might be similar to that. And they charge like $120,000 a year. I'm like, why don't we just take the thing that normally costs $120,000 a year, just make it free. So then all those products no longer hold much relevance in the market. And now it's just a matter of time for people to discover it. And then I'm just curious to see what happens. So, because I could have otherwise continued to try to fund it and license it and try to make money off it that way. I'm like, why don't we put the money on the people? So it's like, if the money is to pay people and labor anyways, then just charge more for the labor. So we charge a lot for the labor because it's talent that can fabricate whatever you can imagine versus just like, can you complete the Security Plus?
Right.
Pay someone $130,000, you can complete a Security Plus, or you can pay people who can just like fabricate an entire cloud just because they know how. And so to me, I'm like, that's who I want to work with.
Yeah, exactly. In the industry with certifications, man, that's one thing I've fought for so long is that certifications are such a false standard to go by because it's such a snapshot in time, a very small set of data or information to consume and test on. And the next day, guess what? Vulnerabilities and new tactics and techniques come out. So really, what is that certification worth? Other than the $5,000 you charge some kid fresh out of college who can't afford it to take the test. So I try to avoid that. And one of my things that I do when hiring people for my MDR is that I don't look at certifications necessarily. I look at how they think and how they problem solve and the creativity, because I think the creativity in this industry is important. I can teach anybody how to look at a platform and alert something, but I can't teach them how to be creative and how to use their mind to go from that point to another point. So I really value your opinion on those certifications, because I think that the certification industry, which is what they become, is a poison.
I think so. It's because you get these folks who think that they need to get these certifications before getting a job. The first technical job that I got, like, I guess that wasn't paying me minimum wage. They said that I needed a certification, but they hired me before getting it. And then they also paid for it. And I failed the cert while working there and getting paid. I don't know how many times until I passed it. And then I see these people trying to get these certifications before getting the job. And it's hard for me to wrap my head around, like, you're going to end up being broke for a year, maybe 2 or 3 years or 4 years, trying to feel like maybe one day you can apply to a job. Like I can't even recommend it. Right. It doesn't make any sense.
You know what? My first certification, besides the CEH, I went and challenged that, took it because my company is paying for it. So it's free.
Yeah.
But the next certification that I challenged was back, I believe it was 2008, and it was SAN certifications. And back then they had where you could challenge the certification test, pay $300 or $400, which wasn't much because they didn't expect you to pass. They wanted you to take the boot camp, but they also did the testing online without proctors. So I went and challenged 3 of their exams in one day and passed them all. And they put me on an audit committee to check and see if I cheated. And I'm like, no, your exams just really suck. So certifications have come in ways, but they still suck. So, and I think that, training and being able to be exposed to the technology and the processes, I think that's where the true knowledge comes from. It's not taking a test, really.
I agree. Because it's like every single student that I've had that succeeded. So like when I built the Pied Hacker experience, that's how I met like everyone who made what like turned into Cloud Underground possible. I made this like package and program called, I got this idea because I was reading a bunch of articles and blogs, and it was like, how did Bezos find his co-founders? Because I had just burned through co-founders like no tomorrow. I think I burned through like 7 co-founders. I apologize to people who think that this is a distasteful opinion, but I think that firing is maybe one of the most valuable things in business. I think the better you are at firing, you'll find significantly more success in life. And I am not opposed to being fired. Let me be blunt about that too. I've been fired. I've had people who disagree with me. I've been part of big layoffs. I've also been a part of causing big layoffs. I've been on all sides of all things. And to me, I just see it as like, it's business, I guess. I don't know. It's one of those
natural
things.
Progression.
Yeah. So like Bezos, how did he find, or at least I don't know if this is true, or if it's just what that blog was saying at the time. Because sometimes people say things that aren't true in blogs, but they're like, oh, he hired his best customers. I was like, oh, hiring the best customers.
Doesn't that make sense?
It made too much sense. And I was consulting mostly with Notia Point, but I was like, well, what if I stop consulting and shift to more of a product focus and make the product to like identify the kinds of people who I wish I knew, to like who I'd work with, which usually means you have to like put people through a series of very specific tests to identify them. And so I created the Pied Hacker experience, and because I'm a gamer, I love video games. I'm not going to even pretend like I'm obviously. It's like games that they'll have like an easy mode and an in between, like intermediate mode. Yeah, you got like the hard mode, and then I really like games like. Have you ever played like Dark Souls or Elden Ring?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah, I love those games, and they like. They're just hard games. Yeah. So I made a mode called Hope for the Hardcore, because I was like, I hope that I find more hardcore is what was in my head when I labeled it that. Because it's kind of like in my own head, like hope for me to find more people who are a little more hardcore than just like, I just am here to complete this thing, and then I'm going to go apply to 4,000 job applications till I get one. One person kept a spreadsheet, took him 4,000 something. It was like 4,002 job applications before landing one. And I'm like, nope, not going to do that. That was not my audience. So I was like, how do I find the more hardcore types? So I made that, and lo and behold, like what it pushed people into is not just build your own technology, but try to also make a living with your own technology. Right. And then I was like, I'm going to find the perfect intern who's going to make that possible. And I just remember I was looking around, and because LinkedIn's filled with all these people who are certain ways. And there was someone named Christina. And I was like, who's Christina? And Christina had blue hair. And then I started talking, and lo and behold, it wasn't actually Christina. That was Zach. And then I was like, I need an intern, and you're the person who is perfect for exactly what I'm looking for, because you just did something half crazy, and I need someone like you. And so he became the intern for that. And you always kind of hope that these things might work the way that they did. But not only did he make his own technology from what he learned with that, he went and started making companies started making his own living. And so I helped him start getting some early deals so he could get some cash cycling around. Then he took that money and started because that's what you hope people do, is like, okay, look, I don't need to give you too much money, just enough to get going. And will you make something of it? Will you? And he did. And then that's what you hope to find. And then I also found Randall, who's part of the Cloud Underground team. And for me, I'm not that person who thinks that people should necessarily work together directly. You can either be a partner or work with me. I don't really care. However people want to work with me, I just see it as like we're just making some things happen. And if we're getting paid and we're eating and we're feeding our families and growing and doing some cool stuff, hey. Randall joined more directly, and he's like, okay, so he was a big part of like the day-to-day process for building out a lot of the other things. And then Zach too, there's a lot of people who are involved. Then you just get into like the dojo from its journey from like 0 members to like 100 members. And the first 10 members created all of the concepts that I collected. And then the few folks of us who did more of the engineering built what's called a hyper-converged data center. And that's what the Underground Nexus is, copy-paste data center.
That's pretty badass. So when I was talking to Zach, when I interviewed him, and talking to Santiago and learning about what they had going on, the copy and paste data center, that's pretty fucking amazing. And, just the concept alone, not even the operation, but in the production, but just the concept, I think is foreign to a lot of people, because we're all used to the constructs that are here now, and the way things have always been done and the way that the industry does it. But I like that you guys actually step outside the box and like look at things from a visionary standpoint and say, hey, look, I know that you're doing your thing this way, and that's great, because I'm not here to impede that, but I'm doing shit my own way. And I think that takes, first of all, it takes a strong person. It takes someone very intelligent, and like you have the entrepreneurial spirit to actually go out and make that shit work. And I totally get what you're saying about giving money to somebody and really hoping that something comes out of it. But it looks like you've been really successful at that.
It's a weird process. I'd say it's partly luck, because it depends on who you run into. But I also see it as you can increase the frequency of luck with numbers too.
Yes. So, and I did hear about the proving grounds, where they can go on to the platform and actually test their skills, and not many people make it through it. And I think that's pretty awesome, because, up until now, we've had OSCP that gave that kind of proof that you can do what you do, until they got, pre-smashed and all the answers to the test leaked and had to reform. But still, that concept, I think, is the winning concept when it comes to finding people, right? So back in about 2006, that was my idea. I was running a pen test team for a company called NEC Unified. And I was having such a hard time finding people back then who knew how to pen test and were proficient at it. It wasn't very new, but again, it wasn't very old either. And what I did was I just grabbed VirtualBox and a bunch of VMs, that were vulnerable, and threw them on there. And that was the test. That was the interview. I don't want to know about certifications. I don't want to know about your education. I want to see how your mind works. And to me, psychology and behavior analysis and stuff like that has always been kind of a hobby of mine. And I think that's stems from the neurodiversity that I have. And so throwing that together and watching how they work as they're doing it, that proves a lot. And I think that you're definitely spot on when it comes to that. I think that's really cool.
It's interesting, because I think I get these folks, because I get a lot of people telling me that the things that I do either aren't possible or that especially before I do them, I'll have this thing where after I complete something that people told me isn't possible, then all of a sudden I lose a whole bunch of followers every single time. And then I gain more every time from all these people who are like, what? Whoa, that's possible. And then I get this wave of people, because if someone's going to hate on me, I'm not going to block you. I'm going to make you watch if you're willing. And if you want to watch, I'll give you a show too. I'll even make it like a magic show, and I'll come up with some tricks if I can. But it's if you can get into that, into the other person's mind a little bit and kind of find ways to build experiences that let you observe what people are doing. And one of the ways that I do it is, how did we make the copy paste data center like a copy paste data center? Because people wonder sometimes well, how is that possible? So it's done with Git, which is, even though it's version management, one of the nice things about Git is I really don't particularly care for licensing things like that, but it also automatically you have copyright right there, because you have some stuff that's written down, and that's got a protection of its own in case someone tries to be oh, I invented this and I'm going to make it impossible for people to do, and then now everyone has to pay for it and it's no longer free. So to prevent that sort of thing, Git lets me have that copyright in case someone tries to basically take down the structure or try to claim that I copied their structure, something stupid. But since it's all written down too, that means that that's all the configurations. They're right there. And whenever you go and start running the little container program for the underground nexus, it just goes back and then reads all of those instructions basically from all of its the Git structure. So yeah, I used to build, not used to, I build systems in general. But when I got into refurbishing, I would build receivers, I would build gaming computers, and I just whatever thing. But you get a motherboard that has inputs and outputs in a BIOS system. So I took the functions of BIOS and put it in Git and basically made Git the BIOS, and that's how it works.
That's pretty badass. You know, and when I learned about the structure, I thought, you know, how genius is that? You know, using Git in order to deploy data centers, like that's pretty badass. But going back to your comment about losing followers, gaining followers, what I found in the industry right now, the temperament and the pulse on the industry, from my perception, is that a lot of people in the industry are tired of hearing the same old shit over and over again. And it's the same buzzwords. It's the same marketing bullshit. People really want to hear something unique and something new. But the caveat to that, and the catch-22 to that, is they want to hear something new and they want to see something phenomenal out of the box that nobody has done before. But then again, the whole industry starts to question: is it true? Is it real? Does it really work? You know, is this bullshit? And then you get the naysayers who, you know, do their thing to disrupt, and it's just a pain in the ass. But what I found is, if you're genuine and you really have something unique, which you do, followers come and go, but they'll always be there. You know what I'm saying?
Fair enough. It is. It's definitely one of those things. It's funny watching like other people who I mentor too, because it's like you go through it for yourself, and then after a while, and you start like having other folks who are like going out there and like putting things into practice. Then you'll like see them going through their experience, and then like everyone gets hit with that, like their first hater, and then it's like that first month of getting like online hate, people just like. Even some of the like people just like are like, what is this? What do I do?
Freak out. Yeah. I did the same thing. A lot of people know about what happened to me last year, and I had a shit ton of haters. But what a valuable lesson that I learned, and I'm not very good at social cues or understanding social concepts a lot of the time. But what somebody told me that really stuck with me is that when you get haters, you're doing something right. No matter if they're talking about you in a positive way or a negative way, they're still talking. And I think that's important, you know, and there's always going to be haters. There's always going to be people who don't want to allow people to be not mainstream. Oh, you're in cybersecurity, you need to think this way. You need to act this way. You need to look this way. And you need to operate this way. And then when you veer off and you're like, wait a minute, I don't buy all this bullshit, and I have my own mind and I'm going to speak it, then everybody's shocked. They're like, wait a minute, you can't do that.
It is true. People freak out. And sometimes people do it to try to save you too. They're like, you're going to end up in a dangerous spot. And they're like, I'm just trying to help you.
Right.
It's like, don't worry. I'm going to jump off that cliff and it's going to be good.
And then I'm going to be the first lemur off that cliff, and everybody else is going to follow me.
And then they're going to be like biting their nails. And then after they like see you do it, they're like looking at the ledge, and they're like, that's maybe it's not as bad as I thought it was.
Maybe that water's not that deep.
Yeah, it's and it is interesting too, because people do more groupthink, because once you start getting enough people just like coming around checking out what you're doing, I've always found this fascinating with groups, because I even went to like I've done so many random things, but like I went to college not for an education, even though I was like, well, I'll get some education because I do like learning and things like that. But really the reason I went to college is because I was like dealing with like complicated like family background things that put me in things. And so it gave me a place to like live. So I was like a residence assistant. Nice. And then I also would like DJ, and that's how I like covered other bills. So I basically got to be paid to live where I lived while also going and getting educated and studying at the same time, while also like, so I studied human communications, and like, it's such a thing. It's such a human thing that like, if you start seeing a group form, it's going to like create its own personality. And you get a lot of people who will naturally want to try to figure out how to like manage the crowd, which can cause some weird things. But like, especially depending on the kind of crowd you have, and you have a little more of like the hacker crowd, because I do too. And if someone says the wrong thing to me out in public, I have to like calm people down. I'm like, Don't you do that. Don't you go knock on that person's door. Don't you go find them. Don't do it. Just don't.
Exactly. And it's funny too how groups take on on their own personality. Like you said, like when I first started this podcast, it was just me and my roommate, and I was just going to talk to people and do a Q&A. That was my idea of doing a podcast. And it went from that to, 4-hour, 5-hour, 6-hour podcast, which was way too long. I think at one point, very early on, we had a podcast where we were like having some bourbon and just kind of hanging out and drinking. After about 5 hours, I think I literally went to my room and fell asleep and crashed, and nobody knew what was going on. They're like, where'd he go? But those were the early days. But what happens was, with just the idea of the podcast and just giving that one podcast, next thing you know, you have a community, and you have a Discord, and you have a website, and you have more people flowing in. And what I found is that when you try to control that, and when you try to put rules in place, when you try to put some kind of structure in place, that organic formation of that group absolutely fucking falls apart. Because it's not what it's for. It's a ball of energy, and you just gotta let it go. Let it be natural, organic. Anytime you try to harness it, it's all fucked up.
It's so true, though.
Yeah, it is 100%. And I had to learn it the hard way. And so I stepped away from Discord, and I was like, this is your place. I'm not going to manage it. I'm not going to, be the head cheese in charge or whatever. This is y'all's place. My place is up here. I got to go out and create and do this, that, and the other, which is good for me. But after I did that, that idea of the group of the Haunted Hacker ended up morphing into more of a global thing, where people are like, oh yeah, have you heard about this? Like, I've been to some conferences where someone will come up to me and say, hey man, I really love listening to your podcast. And it still shocks me, because I'm like, wait a minute, you actually listen to what I say? Like, do you know how dangerous that is?
That makes so much sense. Yeah. I still struggle with that one even now, because it's not even necessarily like imposter syndrome. It's just like, one of my lawyers once upon a time said to me, because I was just like talking about it was like trademarking or so, I don't remember what the conversation was, and he was like, whatever it is that like you think or do, for us as ourselves as individuals, we'll see what we do for ourselves as common, because it's our world, and to us it is common. But the important thing to remember is that to everyone who's not us, it's not. And I think like I just keep remembering that every time I just like get into that. I'm like, oh, that's right. Okay, so this is like, and so I've just like kind of really come into this understanding that it's like, okay, so there's this world in my head that's like common to me, right? And it is interesting when you first start getting like a following and stuff like that. Cause it's funny. I relate to like when you're doing like your early day stuff and you don't have like any attention and stuff, it's like, you're just like, oh, I was just going to go do this thing. And, in the beginning, it's like, you still want to, you're going to keep doing it, cause you're like, oh, it's going to grow someday. But then when it does start to grow, it almost feels like mentally we just stay in the beginning of when it all started. Cause it's like, well, I haven't changed. Everything else around me is changing. I'm like, oh, there's all these people. These people are like, wow, that what you made is really cool. I'm like, oh,
yeah. Who are you?
20 people. And then it's almost doesn't feel real sometimes, but it is.
You hit the nail right on the head. Like, I look back now and I look at what I'm doing and things that I'm trying to promote. It's just like, how did this happen? Like, is this real? Am I going to wake up tomorrow and realize that I'm still like an analyst like 15 years ago? But it's cool though, because, I think what it shows to people coming into the industry, or people who are interested in doing what we do, is that it is fucking possible.
Totally. Yeah.
And, there's a lot of companies, a lot of people out there that will say, oh no, you don't want to do that, or you can't do that. It won't be successful. But it just depends on the person. If you're genuine, you tell the truth, you throw your shit out there, don't give a fuck what people say about it. Guess what? People are going to listen. And I think that's what's cool about what you guys are doing, is that, I'm sure there's naysayers, but what's cool is seeing that you guys are going forward and this shit's working, and that you guys don't really care about what they're saying. That's not the focus. The focus is to make things easy on people and efficient and make money. Totally. And I think that's what we're all here for, really.
Yeah, I mean, people just want to like make enough money to like feed their family, have a good life, like go to a fun event, just like do some stuff, like not work 80-hour work weeks for absolutely no reason.
Right.
Like, I feel like, well, you work in cybersecurity, so you know, like, there's so many companies who just want to treat their like their malware team or their SOC, or I guess it doesn't really matter, like their threat researchers, just as if it's like a sweatshop. And I've even had like some where they'll treat I worked at the SOC and they would treat it like we're the zoo or something like that.
Right.
And the admin would be like, oh, we're just the SOC monkeys. We just throw shit at each other and it's this life. But and it's such a thing. And they're like, look at these beautiful specimen here.
Right.
Do you see them working? Look at that one's typing right now.
Look at the pretty pew pew maps up on the screen. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like, oh, it's beautiful, isn't it?
Yes. And it's so meaningful too. Like all the data is actually usable. Not really.
Right.
But yeah, the first SOC that I worked in, actually the second SOC that I worked in, was we had what we called the fishbowl. So it was, the SOC was stadium seating, big screens in the front. And then in the back on the side, there was a conference room that had windows. When you hit a button, those windows would go from being, opaque to transparent, and they could show the potential clients, and this is where the magic is done or whatever. Really cool concept. I stayed in contact with one of my first bosses out of the military who developed that SOC. And I think that's another key point to really be successful in the industry and in life in general, is that I don't look at my bosses as bosses. I look at them as mentors. And every boss that I've had to date that I still keep in contact with, it's because they were a true mentor. And I don't think there's enough people out there that are actually really mentors, although there are a ton of people on social media that claim to be mentors. But I think it takes a personal connection with those people in order to be a true mentor. And I've had, interns that I've learned stuff from. So when someone tells me, oh, I can't mentor anybody because I've only been in security for a couple of years, bullshit. Everybody has something to share. So
it's so true. Like, it's so spot on, because no matter who you are, and I think that's a good way to look at it too, because ultimately, like, if you're getting hired somewhere, like whoever anyone's boss is really trying to just like help everyone figure out whatever's going on. And there are bad bosses out there, but even at like the worst company that I remember working at, my boss was maybe one of the best bosses I've had. And I stayed at I stayed way longer at that company than I should have stayed. I won't say which company, a bunch of companies I've been at. But like, if it was 3 a.m. in the morning and I was like still working, he was probably working with me and being like, yes, hey, how about you go to bed? I'll be up late. And then at least one of us will I know it's 3 a.m., but you have like 2 or 3 hours of sleep is better than nothing, right? Right. And I just remember, like, I hated that company. I hated the whoever ran the company at the top. But like, I really liked the people and like the direct team members and all that stuff. And I guess it's not that I necessarily hated that individual. I hated how they ran their company and how they treated their staff. And they like, that was definitely a sweatshop. But it is such a thing that, like, when you have a good boss, it's a permanent impact on who you become in the industry.
Right. Or even who you become as an adult or a person.
That's true.
I think every interaction I have with individuals, whether it be short-term interaction or long-term interaction, somehow they influence a part of me that develops or changes based on our interaction. I learned something from everybody. And that's kind of the point of this podcast, is that I started to, first of all, leave a legacy behind for people who are coming into the industry and want to know what it was like when it first started, but also just to learn from people. I think it's a great way to really dive into people's backgrounds and learn something that I may not know, or share something that they may not know.
Totally.
So that's the way I look at it. So where do you see Cloud Underground going? What's the future?
So Cloud Underground, I guess I have I make 50-year plans. It's part of a really long, complex plan, I guess. And if I try to boil, I'm really bad about being brief about really complex plans that I have. So I'll try to find I'm getting better at narrowing concepts. So I used to be really bad at this. So my dad was an entrepreneur, and pretty much even though it was, he was the entrepreneur that just figured out how to barely survive. But you learn from that, because even if we were rather broke growing up and all that stuff, and sometimes it's to the streets it is, or wondering how you're going to eat and stuff, you learn from that experience, and you pick up things. And the company that my dad started, it had its rough patches, but he stuck with it, and until it's now somewhere north, over 40 years that it's been in business now, and it's growing, and it's now has a global presence and all this stuff. So I think seeing that, it's a nonprofit though, which the challenge of that is no long-term money in a nonprofit, which is complicated. So I wanted to come up with a way to not be where you're kind of just under the thumb of your backers, where if you don't abide by their bidding, and try to, and one of the challenges with people who invest is sometimes they try to control your path and they don't know what makes it work. So I wanted to become someone who could sort of help, I guess, others find their path, but without trying to control them, and coming up with ways to be here's some things that you would normally need money for. But how about I just give you the asset and back away? Because when you put money into it and it's cash, people need cash for something. Why don't I just give them the thing and back away? Because if I give them the thing and back away, then I don't end up in that scenario that I grew up in. Because what happens is people start getting anxious about having to please you if you're backing them in some way or providing for them in some way. And then they feel like they must abide by you. And I just don't work that way. So for me, I want to make Cloud Underground become a presence for people to sort of find their own paths and create their own of whatever it is. So even with the Underground Nexus, one of the reasons why, because I get asked the question all the time, because it's a very beastly solution to just be oh, it's free, have this thing. If people take it and iterate by 10% on it, it's no longer the Underground Nexus. It's actually something different, even from a legal standpoint. I can't come after you even if I wanted to. I wanted that scenario though. And so what this means is I want to find the people who go and start making things of themselves and help them as a person first, and bring people together with the resources that we provide as an alternative to funding, to kind of get money less of the conversation. And instead of making money the conversation around let me give you funding, let money to be the certification. Go earn the money. Go earn some cash from your hands, your craft. I'll sit there with you while you're selling. And then when you're well, what am I supposed to be doing today? Did you still selling? But I'm tired of selling. You better get back to selling. I want people to learn how to break out. And I've seen enough people do it that I know that it's not for everyone necessarily, but I want to then start finding ways to incubate partnerships with people as a way to try to find ways to further reward people who are building things up, and then continue to find more ways to build more valuable assets that save people time and money, because I see time and money as the same thing. And one of the other things that I try to practice what I preach. So when people are well, how do you fund a lot of things? Sometimes if I know that I need a thing, I'm not going to ask for money. I'm going to ask for the thing. If I need $100,000 for a thing, don't give me $100,000. Give me the thing.
The thing. Yeah.
Yes. And then I also get people who are well, why aren't you just asking for money? It's no, I don't, because then I have to get labor. I have to build the thing. I have to go make this. That's more time out of my day. So that's more expensive then. And you just getting the thing, hand me the thing. Otherwise, now you gave me money. Now I have to move fast. Now I have to go pay some developers and hope they turn XYZ around. And then all of a sudden reliability of turnarounds goes down. So for Cloud Underground, I really kind of see it being sort of like an incubator company where people come, where we're building I run something called the DevSecOps Dojo. That's part of Cloud Underground. And that's where we do most of like the building. So people come in, they sign up, and then we have a belt system that we just released a rework for that. And we kind of have people kind of work their way toward just like getting experience, just getting used to doing tasks that you probably should consider doing for like a job or a company instead of going to college or something like that. And then in the beginning, it's like training wheels where we just kind of make it like a self-paced job. Like if you were an entrepreneur and someone had just given you a budget to go buy these things, I'm not going to give you the budget to go buy the things, but here's the Underground Nexus. You just have the thing, take it, and then start just doing your build, start building your stuff. That's everything from there. You can do almost free, get a Raspberry Pi at least, and you can get to market. And so then I wait till people work their way up to being like, okay, you are now at the point where you're ready to start being able to make money with this. And at that junction, that's how they get like a belt rank that lets me know that they're ready to start trying to make money. And why don't we just make money the certification? So for me, it's like, make money, go make more money. Have you made money yet? Why are you getting? Because then they're like, well, I want to get some certifications because I don't want to sound greedy or I don't want to make too much money. It's like, well, then you're never going to have money because everything costs money and time costs money. And if you spend a year looking for certs, you're just going to run out of it. And then you're going to end up bagging groceries at the grocery store because you're too broke.
Is TechstrongTV.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to TechstrongTV Live at RSA Conference here in San Francisco. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am thrilled to be back here at this show live and in person. I can tell from a lot of conversations I'm having that a lot of other people are thrilled to be back in person as well. I have a conversation coming up now with Lou Crocker, who is the Director of Customer Engineering. Is that correct? Over at Digital AI?
Sales engineering,
Sales engineering, okay.
Yep. Pre-sales and that type of thing.
Excellent,
Yep,
excellent.
Yep.
Digital AI.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your company.
So Digital AI actually is an amalgamation of 5 companies that was brought together about a little over 2 years ago, with the intent of really bringing to the market something known as value stream management, which is one of those acronyms that everybody talks about.
I know the value stream management.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so we have agile planning, release and deploy, testing, and AI analytics along with our security offering. The idea being really to overall answer the question to CEOs, CISOs, and all those people in the C-suite, what return is our investment bringing to us? Mm-hmm. It's been said, as I know you're aware, that every organization these days is a software company. Right. It doesn't matter what your actual business, what your actual value proposition is. Every organization is a software company. Mm-hmm. So you are, whether you're a retail store, whether you're something in security, whether you're something in development, no matter what you are a software development company. So how do you respond to the needs of the market, the needs of your customers, with new features and functions, etc.? How do you measure that? Mm-hmm. How do you know if where you're placing your resources, that is to say, money and time and development resources, that type of thing, into delivering, like what you're delivering, what's the feedback? In essence, am I making more than I'm spending? Really, at the end of the day, that's the question that we're answering. Am I making more than I'm spending? And so the idea being that we brought together the agile planning aspect of it, which then flows into the release and deploy aspect of it. And then you have the testing, security, and then the analytics. The idea being to sort of create a symbiotic, loop, if you will, for the development of software, the instrumentation of new features and functions. Of course, as you do that, as customer experience has become, I would say, more important than security. Over the years, a decade ago or 15 years ago, you had what I refer to as request response experiences in a browser. That is to say that each experience on a browser page was a single view of an application. And there was not a lot of logic that was resident, because this is pre-mobile devices, of course. There was not a lot of logic that was resident in those applications in the browser. Of course, the problem is that was a very flat customer experience. Yeah. It really was not something that was extremely dynamic or responsive. And then and so that became important. And then on top of that, you have the proliferation of all these mobile devices where the customer experience is like, I have to have it like that, right? And so as that happened, more and more of the logic needed to be resident on the actual device that was in the customer's hands, whether that be a browser or a mobile device. And as that happened, more of the IP, more of the, for example, one of the biggest threats that we're seeing today is with the proliferation of of all the different mobile platforms, is threat actors are actually taking these applications, which do what your organization, what they make the money for your organization, whether it's a retail site or whatever it is, and they put more and more of the logic, more and more of the IP there. So these apps actually, as I say, we are in an increasingly API-centric world, right? Microservices and those types of things. So as the applications have to interact with more of these backend services, they require more API keys, they require more information about how to legally, if you will, penetrate the perimeter security. So what the threat actors are doing is they're taking apart these applications. They're looking inside. They're finding, endpoints. They're finding API keys. They're finding all kinds of different things. And so while you cannot not have perimeter security and behavioral modeling and those types of things, it's quite simply not enough anymore. And so what happens is you need to, in conjunction with that, instrument these applications with security techniques that will, for example, make sure that the app integrity is solid. Make sure that, for example, the environmental controls in the application, is it running on a rooted or jailbroken device, for example? Make sure that all those things can't be bypassed so that the threat actors are unable to legally penetrate the perimeter.
Okay. All right. So I find it kind of fascinating when we're talking about, you mentioned value stream management, and we're talking about, assigning value to security. And to me, that seems like a very difficult thing to do because, as we all know, if you don't have a data breach or some sort of security breach, that doesn't necessarily mean that your security technology investment is worth it, is really bringing that value to the organization.
Right.
So how do you measure security from a value stream management perspective?
Well, I had two comments really. The first one is, the old insurance analogy, right? I mean, you pay for insurance all your life, you hope you never have to use it and that type of thing. And so that is there. But again, how do you know if you don't have a major accident with, if you don't run your, Mercedes into a Porsche, how do you know, if is my insurance enough? You don't, you don't know unless you actually do it, and you hope you never do it. The other thing that we're doing that is actually more prescriptive, is we're plugging into the analytics engine, monitoring. We have an entire monitoring toolkit, if you will, that will actually live in real time feed to a backend server the health of the application.
Okay.
And that is to say that if you have an application that sells clothes, for example, whatever, there's different places. There's the payment module, and there's the module that retrieves the type of clothes. There's the module that takes care of your account. They knows who you are, and all these types of different PII, if you will. And so those all get instrumented with protections, and then they also get instrumented with the ability to tell a remote server, are we healthy? Are we under attack? Are we not under attack? And it's actually very, very valuable to know, what is the first thing the threat actors are trying to do? Are they going, straight for the login bypass? Are they really trying to just penetrate to where, the financial payment system is? And so that actually, and in addition, it actually allows you to react to what you see. And so what we have noticed is that as we engage with new prospects, we actually, during we call it a technical evaluation, when we're engaging with a new prospect, we actually do this very thing. We instrument with this type of AI, and you'd be shocked that they say, "Wow, we didn't know that was happening. We didn't know that this was happening," and it really is able to demonstrate that value. Additionally, it also is able to, quite unintentionally, perhaps, let the organizations know what parts of the application are being used.
Okay.
I mean, if you actually, if you have an organization, we get together as a development team, we think, we get feedback from the market, we think that the customers want the app to do this.
Yeah.
Then you can actually figure out, are the customers actually using that? Because not only does our tool tell you when the threat actors are attacking, it will tell you when they're not. So, but in telling you when they're not, it also tells you that the customers are using that. So there's a couple of different ways that we approach that.
That's great. That's great. And it's certainly a different way of approaching security.
Yes.
and putting that value to the security.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah,
that's good stuff. So what are you guys seeing in kind of that whole DevSecOps space right now? Do you are you seeing that there are more organizations that are adopting DevSecOps and those principles behind application in development in their application development, or do you think that organizations are still kind of taking a kind of a piecemeal approach, if you will?
Well, we're seeing. I think the short answer to the question is we're in the stage where I think that more are realizing they need to adopt it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've seen a little bit of, I don't know if it's resistance or just complacency in terms of, because so many people have their CI/CD pipelines or dev pipelines already in place, already there. And there's a cost. I mean, there is a cost, whether that a combination of financial and well, it's all financial at the end of the day, but in terms of dev time, to integrate new tool sets. As more of the, and this is where I think that the United States is a little bit behind because of the governmental regulations that have lagged a little bit behind. For example, Europe with GDPR, and they have to actually have like by law they have to have these things, and the law will really quickly force you to adopt something even if you don't want to, right? And so I think that we're seeing a little bit of that, but we're also seeing that the value of I really think that the insight that we are able to provide is starting to outweigh the cost of actually adoption, which of course is always the fight when you're talking with the C-levels and what's the cost, what's the value, that type of thing. And so I think that we're starting to see that the insight that we can provide is actually outweighing or value and making the value stronger than what the cost to adopt. So I think that people are doing that.
So do you think there's the reticence on behalf of the developers, those who are actually using the tool chain currently to learn a new technology, to kind of interrupt the flow, if you will, of their current tool chain, to add security into that process? Do you think that it's they just don't want to have to deal with it, or do you think it's more like maybe a lack of understanding, if you will, about the once they see what something like that can do for them, then they're more apt to embrace the sec part of DevSecOps?
Well, I think I think probably there are as many different views on that as there are developers, but I think that in general, if I were to generalize, I would say that at the development level, and I am a developer, so I know the developers want to develop, right? They just want to, they don't really necessarily want anything that helps them do that. They want to do, and given the, certainly in the last 2 years, the proliferation of the need for pushing more experiences out there because people are no longer coming into brick and mortar, right? Everything's online.
Right.
And so there's, in all fairness to all developers, there is a lot of pressure to get that feature function out the door. And it's more than the fact that they just don't see value in it. It's that they've got so much to do that even if they want to do that, how do you do that? How does a program manager get the time to implement that? So we have actually developed a number of ways that make it relatively, our tools are relatively seamless to the actual development process, which is very beneficial. And we've, we've released over the last 6 months some tools of a different tier of our product that's actually one step down from what we know as the premium product, which is completely configurable to what we know as the pro product, which actually does some sort of best practices analysis of your application and that type of thing. So, and then it instruments the security based on that, so that the developers really don't have to change in any way what they're doing.
Okay.
And we've always done that, but we're doing it to a much greater degree right now as we're seeing part of the reticence is just time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a recurring conversation that I'm having. Time is the big roadblock these days. The big bottleneck is we just don't have enough time to do everything we need to do. So how can we get beyond that? Because obviously, we keep hearing the stats that there aren't enough security people. There'll never really be enough people to fill all of the security positions that are open. Same thing within the developer ranks. We're experiencing a huge dearth of qualified people in these spaces. Automation is helping a little bit, but obviously it is not the panacea because we're still experiencing a lot of these issues. So what do you think is going to be the answer to this?
Well, I think and it's probably not a very satisfying answer, but the answer really is value. When the value exceeds the value of something else in the value chain, it gets attention. Really what it is. We would all love to say that we are getting, that we're getting more developers, we're graduating more developers from college, which is not true. We are, we're seeing, more, people take up this or security or this type of thing. And while there are fantastic programs out there, there are fantastic, as you said, there are not enough. There just are not enough. And so what I think, really the answer is, as the value increases, whether that be through legislation, which we've seen in certain places, or whether that be through incidents, which we've seen in other places, or whether, quite frankly, if we make it easy enough, which we're trying to do, then that can sort of balance out the value argument and say, we see the value, this, that, and the other, then we can then, if it's easy enough to adopt, then, which we're trying to make that, then I think it becomes a really viable conversation.
All right. So what's next for you guys?
What's next for us? Well, we have recently adopted a sort of a 6-month type of platform, overall platform launch. We just went through one in April known as the Ascension launch, which was essentially, early on, we're really bringing in and truing up the releases, the major releases of all the individual pieces of the value stream. As we go forward, we have another one in October.
Okay.
And as we go forward, what we're really looking to do is to increase the integration, particularly with those analytics I was discussing, and not only from a security perspective, but also from, as I was mentioning, the development insights perspective, and really potentially feeding all that information back around into and sort of, if you can picture a loop, really, back around into the Agile side, so that, for example, software defects can, if they're identified, can automatically be reported. We can automatically create features, stories that can then be pushed into the teams and then can be developed. So that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to overall, attain the true meaning of value stream management, which is it's kind of a North Star. It's kind of it's the goal that we're trying to go for. It's ambitious, and it does take time. I think we're getting there. We know where we're going. It's just a question of, what's the next thing that we can do? And I think we've identified that, and we're working toward that next platform launch. And so some exciting things I think are coming.
All right, great. Well, Lou, thank you so much for
Thank
taking
you.
the time, having the conversation with me. Always a pleasure.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Great, great. All right, everybody, we have got some lots more conversations, great conversations coming up. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be back in just a few minutes.
This is TechstrongTV.
All right, welcome back to TechstrongTV Live at RSA Conference here in San Francisco. So very excited to be back in person, and we are filling up this hall, and there are a lot of people here, and I'm having so many great conversations. And with me now is Nikhil Gupta, who is the CEO and co-founder over at Armor Code. Nikhil, thank you so much for joining me today. I do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So we actually just talked not too long ago about an event that we hosted for you guys, a virtual event called AppSecCon. What a great event that was. You guys brought together some of the best folks in the application security space for the event. And by all points, it was a success. So lots of great conversations happening there. But I want to kind of hear from you what you guys are seeing in the application security space. But before we do that, I don't know if you want to let us know all about Armor Code for those people who might not be familiar with you.
Sure. So for those who doesn't know Armor Code is building the AppSecOps platform of choice. While application development has transformed a lot, from monolithic to microservices, waterfall to agile, and plethora of use of open source, application security has been painful and not scalable. So, for every application, you need at least over a dozen tools, SES, AST, like whole bunch of the tools, and you generate a lot of false positive. Number two, these tools outputs are not talking to each other. You put it into Excel sheet, so you're living in Excel hell. And, we have like application security, operations, and engineering team. These are three opposite organizations with oppositely aligned interest. And last but not the least, there's one AppSec engineer to 100 developers. So that makes it even more difficult. So basically, Armor Code AppSecOps platform provides four things. One is the application security posture management. It gives you a complete 360-degree view of your applications, your security posture and all. Second thing is the universal vulnerability management, because you don't need a vulnerability management and a DevSecOps platform. So while you are getting information for our AppSecs, you can also get it from the infrastructure and you can prioritize them. Third thing is the DevSecOps automation and orchestration, because everybody wants to do it. When you're releasing once a day or several times a day, you need automation. And last but not the least, when the software is changing so fast, you need to have continuous compliance. So Armor Code AppSecOps platform gives a complete solution for all these needs.
That's great. So do you guys have any announcements here at the show?
Absolutely. So we actually very recently did, and I'll briefly talk about the AppSecCon conference. Sure. And thanks for helping us with that. That was the world's largest digital application security conference. In the very first conference, we have more than 2,200 registrations. And for those who arranges these registrations, how difficult it is to attract people, and we got a 4.7 out of 5 rating. And we had some very good key speakers like Phil Venables, Bashar, and a lot of those people showed up. And in fact, we were offering CPE credit, so a lot of people benefited from that.
Oh, great.
So that conference was great. At the same time, we also announced our application security survey, State of AppSec survey results. And the number one challenge why application security is not being done is because of the challenge of hiring people. And so as a result, we are constantly listening to our customers and the industries. So number one announcement is a no-code automation. So for instance, like SolarWinds happened in December 2020. So Log4j happened in December 2021, and it's a matter of time, and people are expecting what will come next. It's not if, it's what will come in 2022. So you need to automate that. So AppSecOps platform, we have no-code automation. You can entire runbook to simplify that operations. Number two, here we have customers have been complaining there's a lots of data, but there's no visibility. So we are announcing that we have touched 110 plus integrations. So those of you don't know, like government companies will take 2 2 or 3 integrations in like a quarter or so. We have done 110 plus integrations. So not only we are covering application security tools integrations, cloud security, posture management configurations, and container configurations. And then the third thing, which is very painful for the customers, is there's a friction between the developer and the security people. And as a result, we have launched a knowledge-based product, basically, which is a key capabilities where the developers don't have to go and search about it on the internet and get some spurious codes over there. They can leverage from what their past predecessors have done. So these are the 3 key announcements, and we are super excited about that.
Yeah, wow, that's really beneficial on so many levels. What you guys are adding to the platform, and especially with visibility is a huge issue these days. So the fact that you guys are addressing that as well is very, very, very cool, I think. So let's talk a little bit about this AppSecCon event. As part of that, you guys introduced us to the Purple Book community. So tell me a little bit about Purple Book and what it aims to do.
Yeah, so Purple Book community is a security of the security people by the security people. So a couple of years ago when I was starting Armor Code, one thing which I realized that application security, product security or software security, it's bigger than any individual company, right? So it's bigger than Armor Code and all, and it needs a community to solve this problem. It's not an individual problem. So we brought a bunch of security leaders like Sean and others who are from various Fortune 50, Fortune 500 companies. And it's like an area where people come in, they talk twice a month. And in fact, we are launching 10 new chapters of Purple Book community.
Really?
So,
wow.
So exactly. So we started with the local Bay Area chapter. And in fact, we are kind of going to go international. We are looking to open in India, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, Middle East. So that's, you can see that how much excitement is there and how much value people are deriving. So it was started as a community of just 30 people. We launched a book, Purple Book, which actually just got released also at AppSecCon. And so it's an open source book. People can go and learn the contents and everything else. So first things first is people need to educate themselves, and application security is so new that you cannot go to a university and kind of learn it over there.
Right.
So the best people are to teach are also the security leaders. So that's where the few of us got together and we are sharing that content. And that's what people are really liking it. Part of that offshoot was an application security conference, AppSecCon, because people realized that, hey, there is no, like, of course, we have a RSA, but it's RSA for security for everything. But there was no focused conference, if you will, for application security. So that is what we kind of got together with that. And so in Purple Book, again, so it's now become a movement because we have thousands of people up showing for the AppSecCon. And now we are getting inbound from like all over the world, literally all over the world. People like, we want to bring this community to our local thing so that other people can benefit.
That's great. That's great. Love to hear groundswell opportunities like that, and just raising the collective profile of application security is certainly something that the Purple Book community is very much doing. And I expect great things from the Purple Book community moving forward. And Armor Code as kind of the steward of that, you guys are doing great things as well. Great news on the new features that you guys have announced here at RSA. So many good things happening with you. So what's next for Armor Code?
So Armor Code, we had a big vision when we started. We have a solid-based platform as we speak. And now the platform is ready and we are just constantly listening to customers are adding. We had a phenomenal year of sales. So we had our first year of sales end of March. And we kind of, quote unquote, we are here to set records. We set a record. We create a very good revenue over there. We signed one Big Four as a customer who's offering MSSP services on top of our platform. And now it's just growth, right? So all I say is build and sell, if you will, when it comes to the company, right? Build the product and sell the product. And of course, give back through the community.
Great. Well, Nikhil, thank you so much for stopping by, telling us what's going on with Armor Code. And it's great to see you in person, live and in person.
Absolutely. I'm so glad. And thanks for having me again.
Great. Yes, absolutely. All right.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. We've got lots more TechStrong TV interviews coming on up here at RSA Conference live in San Francisco. So please do stay tuned. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Norris Ishmael, who is Managing Director for Breakwater Solutions, and we're talking about data privacy and the legislation that we're all about to see go through Congress. Norris, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Mike, for having me here. Hello from London.
All right. So we are finally putting together something that looks like the American Data Protection Act. It's sure it will change in its many forms as we wind through the legislative process. But from your perspective, we've already seen in Europe the GDPR, and these two efforts are somewhat similar. So what should IT organizations and cybersecurity professionals get prepared for here as we put this all together?
Sure. Thanks, Mike. It's a very, very good question. As we learn throughout the process, not just in the context of the current debate in the Congress, but as well as the outside the US view about the current progress, privacy professionals, cybersecurity professionals, data governance professionals, even CPO, chief privacy officers, general counsel, even at executive level have been looking into how exactly the current ongoing, progress, would actually be much more pragmatic rather than over prescriptive and too prescriptive, like the GDPR experience of 5 years ago during the debate and also the lobbying in Brussels. So it is one angle that perhaps, relevant stakeholders need to think about because of twofold. The first is we've seen many data-driven organizations have been innovating and also reinventing and re-engineering the technology, the innovation, and just to ensure that everything is based on their business model and strategy. But at the same time, whatever legislation at the federal level that the current, initiative by the Congress is currently debating, hopefully it would not undermine and inhibit whatever innovation and digital breakthrough from the US perspective, which is important because we've seen some of these, blocking mechanism, not only from the perspective of the technological, sophistication and as well as innovation, but also we've seen lots of debate about, whether some technologies and the business model might be relevant and ethical in the context of data processing activities and the principles of privacy laws, that are quite, dominant, not just from the GDPR perspective, but also other state privacy laws in the US and also sector-specific laws in the US. So there's a first very high-level, lens. Another very high-level lens that we've seen based on the GDPR experience, Mike, vis-a-vis the US experience is that even though GDPR is a one-stop shop, but in reality, we've seen regulators, individual regulators, data protection authorities in the UK, ICO, for example, and also CNIL, French, and Hamburg, Bavaria in Germany, and the Dutch authority in the Netherlands, and the Irish Commission in Ireland might have certain difference in terms of how they view and provide that kind of guidance. So I think that one-stop shop mechanism is actually not fully one-stop shop, partly because of different views, the technical views, the commercial views, and also the cultural aspect on the ground within the European economy area in the UK. So I think this is also an aspect which in America maybe is learning and will be fully aware, especially from the FTC perspective. But it would be good to actually really take some of these lessons learned in the current debate, in the Congress within the wider stakeholders.
Mm-hmm. It's probable that the US version of this will be less prescriptive than GDPR, given the nature of the politics that we deal with here. But it's also probable, too, that right now our situation may be worse than it is without this legislation, because right now we have 50 states that are all going to have different versions of these laws put into place, and the ones in California are likely to be more prescriptive than, say, the ones in Texas. So do you think at the end of the day that we should all be kind of rooting for this because it would bring some clarity to the situation?
I like that question, Mike. I think there's two sides of the coin. The first side of the coin is if we look into the more innovative state like California, for example, right? There's a CCPA/CPRA, very much like a mini GDPR, even if it's like not 100% like GDPR. But in reality, on the ground, what we're seeing is that most of the compliance activities is very much like paper-based box-ticking exercise, right? Okay, we have updated the notice, we have updated the privacy policy. Okay, if you want to complain, okay, there's a complaint mechanism, and you have the right to actually like request for deletion, not access, or erasure, or perhaps correct the data. And it's still an evolving process in California, which actually, in a way, some of their jurisprudence are influenced by or triggered by the GDPR. On the other hand, if you look into other sector-specific legislation in the US, like, the COPPA and as well as GLBA and HIPAA, which really cover the covered entities in the US, there are certain level of maturity, which I think that needs to be maintained, and partly because the data sets are very much sensitive personal data sets, so to speak. I think the challenge that America is having right now, as I said, 50 states, out of 50 states, like more than 20 states has its own relevant state laws. And there are also forthcoming legislation that will be passed at the state level. And you also have this ongoing debate at the federal level. And there's sort of the preemption, kind of mechanism, which is still being debated, by the Congress and also even by policymakers. And also there's also the private right of action, which is a very delicate, angle as well, in the context of America, landscape. And on the one hand, the business or the Chamber of Commerce in the US argue that, okay, this should not be really, be passed to the Congress because there's a lack of stakeholders consultation, 360-degree consultation across the wider industries in data, driven sectors. But on the other hand, there's actually, really high enthusiasm and lobbying towards, really push and accelerate this, because this has been around for quite some time, like more than 5 years, initially when they wanted to really have this at the federal level. I think because of the complexity of the mosaic of the US landscape, in my view, it's important to look into, what exactly the highest risk and versus the technological innovation, technological kind of breakthrough, because America is leading the technology, when it comes to anything that deals with innovation, and at the same time, how to stabilize whatever kind of innovation versus the legislation, because we do not want it to be over-regulated. I'm not saying that the GDPR is over-regulated, but at the same time, there is still an encouragement, for the business to get engaged and then to keep on telling the regulators and as well as the drafters that actually, in reality, this is what it means. I think it's important for the stakeholders to really outline scenarios by scenarios, based on sectors by sectors, and to look into the top 3 or top 5 risks so that it will be well articulated as part of the lobbying and the conversation in the Congress.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the organizations, especially here in the US, are a little haphazard when it comes to data management, shall we say. Did you see in Europe that once GDPR went in, that people elevated their data management capabilities and their best practices and they got better at managing data, or, did it have a minimal effect?
I like to answer this way. It depends, Mike. It's like a lawyer kind of answer. it depends on how exactly the organization is. It depends on the governance structure and how mature the governance structure is. And it depends on how exactly the board of directors, the leadership, and as well as the security champion, data champion really cascade the importance of data management to the wider business. We'll take an example. If, let's say, Fortune 500 companies or Fortune 50 companies in the US, if they have a very strong leadership, strong tone that telling to the wider entities globally outside the US, hey guys, privacy by design, security by design, data taxonomy, data lifecycle, data retention, data deletion is all very, very important. And we need to cascade it to the wider, operations and wider entities outside, the US. But of course, there's a local variation, regional variation in terms of the data management. So that will be like the best model to be replicated. However, what we're seeing right now is that companies are innovating and structuring and restructuring the business partly because of geopolitical risks, partly because other risks that triggered, by other unsystematic risks, from the business, partly because of sanction and partly because of other, unsystematic investigation by third party or auditors or even regulators. So at that data management level, it's important to really look into three things. The first is understand the data taxonomy. I have been re-emphasizing this many, many times, not just in the context of the UK and Europe, but also the US stakeholders and US organizations. And second, understanding the data lifecycle. What is like your data lifecycle and how you deal with this? Do you actually bring CISO in the conversation, the CPO in the conversation, marketing in the conversation, HR in the conversation, or even strategy guys in the conversation? And the third is prioritizing what needs to be prioritized. Take the top 2 or top 3 highest risk in your data management, environment, assuming your highest risk is transfer data outside the US, especially to countries which are actually a quite high risk in terms of the business dealing, or perhaps, a market, then you need to think about a very different innovative approach towards that. But the reality, Mike, that we're seeing in the market is that you need technology and solution to do this. You can't use spreadsheet. You can't use word format. You can't use manual, steps or workflow. And this is where a lot of organizations are struggling, not only in the context of, multinational, but also in the context of startup, medium-sized companies, and as well as companies that might be subjected to mergers and acquisition. So in short, to answer your question, Mike, yes, data management is important. Go back to basic, try to simplify the narratives, especially at the board level, management level, and cascade it to the wider stakeholders so that they understand what is it all about. Okay, do not assume that they understand your technical expertise and language, and try to tell them like as if that you're teaching, school children, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Should I just bite the bullet and try to comply with GDPR now on the assumption that if I meet that one, I'll comply with the American one and I'll just be ahead of the game?
Yeah, I think what we have seen a lot, in the market globally, Mike, is that most of these, multinationals in the US that really regard brand and also their products and services as like a strategic kind of positioning in the market, they actually take GDPR as a global framework, baseline framework. So what it meant by baseline is that, right, we use it as a baseline, but it doesn't mean that we are going to use 100% what GDPR says, right? And we still have the CCPA, CPRA for California, and we also have the sector-specific, legislation, in the US, and as well as some of the states in the US. And there's different kind of scorecard where you look into the risk dashboard. It might be red, it might be amber, it might be green. So the risk posture and maturity might be different, as compared to one to another. So we're seeing most of the multinationals are taking that approach. What I'm saying is the matured, multinational, which have a very strong brand in terms of their brand premium and also their brand value and market valuation. On the other hand, we also seen lots of online businesses or even startup or even startup that might be, acquired by big boys or big companies where they actually focus on information security, cybersecurity first, because they know that, okay, this is very important and we need to invest more on the controls, on the framework. But when it comes to privacy, they will actually prioritize and realign what needs to be realigned. And that's actually their strategy. It works in a very small and sizable environment. But once you go into the cloud environment, that's where the complexity will come in, because there'll be potential risks in terms of where the data goes, how long you delete, how long you keep the data, and you delete the data, or you keep the data forever. So there will be like certain cherry-pick scenarios, Mike, that we're seeing in the market. But then again, this is actually a journey and it's still work in progress.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that these privacy regulations change the way people think about cybersecurity? And as cybersecurity becomes something more than just kind of an ounce of prevention, it's more about, we need to actually think about this in terms of these fines, and the fines are substantial. So now the security issues are a much higher level boardroom discussion.
Yeah, if you look into how exactly the data protection authorities in the EU or the European Economic Area and in the UK fine organizations or even multinationals, the way they actually investigated certain breaches of quite delicate and quite thorough, so to speak. Even though there's actually a debate where they highlighted that, hey, regulators have not done much, even though GDPR says that you might be subjected to 4% of the global annual turnover. But if you see, and if you compare and contrast how the data protection authorities in each of the member states in the EU, or even the European Economic Area, even if you read a report of the Irish Data Protection Commission, the ICO in the UK, CNIL in France, and some of the German, regulators, the level of fine, it differs, from one to another, because it goes back to the organizational measure, security measure, the controls, and also the resilience, organizational resilience, and even very simple stuff like training and awareness, data campaign, security campaign, which actually is very, very important as part of, ongoing, kind of engagement with the wider stakeholders and also with partners and third-party vendors. So we're seeing the trend now, Mike, is that Global Chief Privacy Officer and CISO are actually working closely together, where previously, 5 years ago, even 10 years ago, it was very siloed in isolation. All right, when it comes to IT matters, we just actually give to the CISO or perhaps the head of IT, to deal with this when it comes to infrastructure. But now, because of this emergence of privacy regulation around the world, not just in the context of the US landscape, but also in the Middle East and North Africa, and also outside, Middle East, like in APAC, and as well as Southeast Asia, we're seeing that the role of information security and cybersecurity is much, much more important. It's not like a typical IT help desk or just, walk through the controls. And in the context of data breach, for example, the CISO and as well as the Chief Privacy Officer have to work together and bring in the data governance guys, even the general counsel, and really, socialize and stress test the data breach environment, or, having a tabletop exercise market by market, because each of the respective market has its different approach. Okay, even though GDPR, for example, says 72 hours, but it doesn't mean that, all right, you have to deal with this in the context of, the 72 hours. Again, it depends on the severity of the breach. It depends on to what extent that, the data set, really affected, by the breach, and having legal counsels to really, really involve with the engagement and negotiation and discussion with the regulators and the wider stakeholders as well. So in short, to summarize, aptly to your question, answer to your question is that cybersecurity, data privacy, data governance, whatever the role that America, has, typically is Chief Privacy Officer, CISO, Chief Data Governance Officer, Chief Data Officer. They have to work and align, because if you have this kind of alignment, it can accelerate any kind of matters, not only in the context of data breach, but also engagement with regulators worldwide.
All right. So what's your best advice to folks as we kind of get ready for this next round of legislation that seems inevitable, but what should people be doing, or what do you wish most people would do before they get started that you've seen from your GDPR experience?
I think there are three things that, perhaps the US landscape can learn from, the EU, European Economic Area, as well as the UK. The first is address the basic principles very clearly and in clarity. Because if the basic principles are not addressed in clarity, in a very clear way, with illustration, with example, okay, the debate will be like, around the bush. It will be like ongoing, having a consensus towards it, because the principles are so important. And when I looked into the text, when I cross-referred to the current text of this American Data Protection and Privacy Act versus GDPR, there are some similarities, but I think that it requires more clarity in terms of, the principles and as well as the exemption. And a second, it would be good to also provide in a clear kind of illustration to what extent that the exemption applies, versus other state laws, or preemption versus other state laws, and as well as certain definition that requires more specific, illustration rather than very vague and very broad, kind of illustration. With a caveat, I'm not a lawyer, but based on my experience as a data protection practitioner, consulting practitioner, which help organizations to operationalize the global data privacy program, once the organization has secured sign-off legal advice, it's important to really dissect the taxonomy that triggered by the relevant principles, and then simplify it, to the wider stakeholders. I think that's the second, guidance, which I think is particularly important. The third, which I think that the relevant stakeholders in America, whether corporate, policymakers, academics, even insurers, brokers, and as well as privacy advocate, even, any, political parties, of course, it's a very bipartisan kind of initiative. They also need to engage with some of their peers in the EU institutions. When I say engage, means that, all right, okay, we are undergoing what you guys have undergone like 5 years ago. Okay, can you just like simplify and tell us the top 5 areas that you guys learned throughout the process, that we are undergoing right now. And as you're fully aware, currently, the European Commission is reviewing the current text of GDPR, and we might have our GDPR coined as GDPR 2.0, which still, will be debated, in the European Commission, hopefully by Q3, Q4, or next year onwards, and still work in progress. And having that kind of engagement with data protection authorities in the EU, with the UK ICO, and even with APAC data protection authorities, because there are quite very useful lessons that can be learned from the Singapore Personal Data Protection Commission, or even Japan, and even China, because China has PIPL, which is a federal law, very much like GDPR, but in a China context. So once you have this kind of compare and contrast kind of analysis, the next step is, right, okay, what can we do for America to make this clarity and with very practical illustration? Because at the end of the day, business want to get clarity what they need to do, once the law will be passed here.
All right. Hey, Norris, thanks for sharing your insights.
Thanks so much, Mike, for having me here.
All right, guys, back to you in the studio.
Hey everyone, I hope you all enjoyed today's TechStrong TV episode. We had some great interviews with Alan from RSA Conference and KubeCon Cloud Native Con, as well as another episode from The Haunted Hacker with Mike Jones. Charlene's conversations from RSA Conference were also awesome, and View with Vizard, as usual, didn't disappoint. We also had some in-studio interviews as well as a special TechStrong TV Today episode, which welcomed Mike Rothman to the team. We'll be airing another episode tomorrow, so please join us for that. Once again, thank you for joining, and we hope to see you again.